Welcome, good evening. It is Tuesday, January 3rd. It is 7:08 p.m. and we're going to begin by doing a roll call vote so we can see if we can conduct business.
Meekum present.
Ince present.
Summer Hayes present.
First present.
McEwen present.
Okay, we have all council members present and we will excuse the mayor as he is traveling this evening. We do have on the agenda that I'm going to do a thought or prayer, but I've asked council member Meekum to do that for me. So,
Our kind Heavenly Father, we thank Thee so much for this beautiful night, for the opportunity we have this night of meeting together and making important decisions for our city. We are grateful for the great city that we have, for all of our first responders that help keep us safe, and all the officials that help make decisions to make our lives better. We ask Thee at this time to please bless all of our first responders. Bless those in our community, especially those that are in special needs at this time. Please bless our military personnel and their families at home. Please comfort them and protect them. Please bless all of the leaders to help them to make good decisions for our country, our state, and please bless us that we will be guided to make decisions that are best for our residents. And I say this prayer in Christ's name.
thank you. If you'll all join me in writing to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We now have scheduled an open session, which is where members of the public can come to the podium and give any comments or make requests. Just ask that you keep your comments brief, 2 to 3 minutes. Do we have anybody that would like to come forward this time? Also, please note we do have a public hearing scheduled for the street vacation agenda items, so please wait for that item if that's what you're commenting on. I'm not seeing anyone come forward, so we will move on to our items of business. Our first item of business is the public hearing for the street vacation for the portion of 100 East from 100 North to 200 North. And I'm going to turn the time over to Brant to introduce that.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Hurst. Before staff has received a petition to vacate a portion of 100 East public right-of-way between 100 North and 200 North, conveying such vacated portion of public right-of-way to the respective adjoining owners. So the three property owners who have petitioned. I believe it's approximately 7 feet of 7 feet wide strip of the property to be vacated. The staff recommends approval of this, but also recommends that we retain a public utility easement on that 7 feet that is consistent with other types of developments that we have in the city, such as Summerhill Lane. We retain public utility easements 10 feet behind sidewalk per our ordinance, and so we're just recommending that we also retain or create a public utility easement with this vacation. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And I have staff here, Kevin Campbell and Corey Snyder, to also answer any questions.
Are there any other easements that already exist on those properties, the utility or otherwise?
Kevin? In the public, I can answer while he's coming up. We do have, in the park strip, we have power poles. I believe we just had a question from Dominion today that we received, a comment.
You know, we would have to check the documents at the county. I don't know that there are other public utility easements. I don't believe that there are, most likely because it's a fairly old piece of property that probably was never platted. So typically if there is a subdivision since maybe mid-70s, there might be public utility easements. In this case, I doubt that there are any public utility easements on the lot.
So would you say that would be consistent with anything prior to 1970, where there wouldn't be one? I'm just trying to gauge, like, is this a old town site issue, or is it like anywhere in Centerville you'd have potentially the lack of a public easement?
Old town sites typically would not have a public utility easement, but a subdivided plat typically would. Some of the older plats are maybe like the Rolling Hills subdivisions. Some of the earlier plats were mid-70s, early 80s is when easements started to be required with subdivisions approximately. So,
As you'll see throughout the old town area, that the city right-of-way is pretty wide. In fact, goes up to the doorsteps of some homes. So there's not necessarily a need for an easement. I mean, I'm just guessing here. If for an easement, if you own the right-of-way and the utilities are within that right-of-way.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to unpack is like, are we trying to create a policy statement that we need these?
no,
And
you
so
know,
would we need that to be on anything going forward, or just?
typically, if somebody came in to subdivide or a lot split, the ordinance would require a 10-foot front yard easement and then a 7-foot side yard easement on two of the other sides. So I don't think that it's imperative that we necessarily get the easement now. You know, if later on if they split the lot, it would be required at that time, 10-foot front yard easements. So I don't know that there's an ordinance necessarily driving this. It's just typically on most lots, we have a 7 to 10-foot front yard easement. Is it that important that we get that right now? In my professional opinion, probably not. The power poles are in the park strip. So do we need it? Absolutely, probably not. But it's a typical standard that we would usually have a public utility easement back of sidewalk.
It makes sense. I'm just trying to be consistent with what we're doing if we're, because I don't think this is the last cleanup activity. As I asked Brent, you know, like, are there other parcels that these sorts of problems might exist? He said, yes. So I don't want to treat like old town site Centerville differently than other areas of town unless there is a practical reason to do so.
So did we do that on the last ones that we did, Bradshaw's and somebody, that we did just a few weeks ago?
I'm trying to remember, one was was it kind of a, in between two lots, there was a gap? So typically, if it's a gap between two lots, we would not ask for an easement, but back a sidewalk, again, if it was a subdivision, it would be required. If it was a lot split, it would be required. So it's just a typical standard detail that we use, but we don't have a lot of these, so it's just something that came up, well, yeah, we ought to probably have an easement back a sidewalk. That's our city standard.
But we
Is it
haven't
imperative?
done it before here in the historic district.
We haven't done a lot of these. This is pretty atypical. It's not something we do very often.
I would like to clarify with the Bradshaw, though, that was already an existing vacate, right? It was already completed, and we were just enforcing what was already done. It wasn't a new petition to vacate from the beginning. It was just recognizing that it was already previously approved that we were just enforcing, because the survey was done incorrectly at the time.
So I want to unpack what you were saying a little bit about, like, the subdivision triggers the easement. Could you go back through that? If they subdivide the lot, that triggers the requirement of an easement?
Yes, the ordinance, if they were to lot split or subdivide, that would trigger the ordinance that would require a front yard. It would be a 10-foot front yard easement, and then 7 feet, typically on two of the sides or one of the sides on the back. And that's the way the ordinance is written. So that's not the worst thing. You know, if they someday do split the lot, we can get it at that time. That's not, the end of the world.
And that's where we stand. It's a recommendation, but again, council has the discretion whether or not
So,
to proceed.
Brant and Kevin, I wish Lisa were here, and I understand why she's not, but staff's history has been very reticent at best to ever give up any land throughout the city. So before I ask any other questions, why is this case different?
No, it's a fair question,
Because it's a
so,
staff recommendation, so I want to make sure I understand why staff feels differently now in this specific instance, in this
right.
case, because we have other parcels throughout the old town where we have right-of-way, large right-of-ways, and are we setting ourselves up for any precedent where various community members say, well, hey, you did it for these guys, do it for me, and then we end up with this weird hodgepodge of rights-of-way. It's not a clean right-of-way throughout.
I can probably.
So both, I'd love
I'll
to.
let Kevin answer.
Yeah, for sure. So in this instance, it's kind of a cleanup type of piece because usually we only own right-of-way to the back of sidewalk. Currently, we own right-of-way to about 7.5 feet back of sidewalk. In this type of subdivision, neighborhood, a residential street, we typically have 50 feet of right-of-way, back a walk to back a walk. Currently, on this street, for whatever reason, back of the old town site plat, we have 66 feet of right-of-way. So it's kind of one of those where we don't really need that right-of-way for a typical city residential street. You know, if someday, if it was maybe a fourth west or a fourth east where you're more of a collector street, you might want to preserve that right-of-way. In this instance, staff agrees that it's not really for 50-plus years in the foreseeable plan that would ever really need to be utilized by the city to widen.
Or
So
to
that's-
realign that intersection was one of our early on conversations was, because the intersection is, you know, a little off.
Offset, right?
So the conversation was, would we ever have the intent of realigning this intersection? With the traffic, it's not a huge, if it was a lot of traffic on that road, we may want to straighten it out, but we don't see it in the next 25, 50 years needing to be realigned, and so we didn't see necessarily need to hold on to this piece. But you're absolutely right, Councilmember Summerhays, we're always hesitant to give up property, particularly if we ever need it in the future, we're paying fair market value to acquire it. If there was any desire to widen the road to include trails, an 8-foot multi-purpose pathway, whatever the case might be, or if the school gets, there's so many reasons why you'd want to preserve or maintain the right-of-way. I think we learned early on as cities when we would corridor preservation, right? When we would give up property, then all of a sudden say, oh my gosh, we need that property back. We've evaluated this particular request, and we are concerned about precedent, but at the same time, it's case by case, right? I mean, I don't think you go a certain direction with this request that you're beholden and required to go that way with any other future request. You can look at it differently.
But I do think that is partially my concern with this application is we are looking very myopically at 3 homes, and it really does impact, you know, not that we're gonna go out and take care of the whole old town area, but I don't feel like I'm comfortable with looking at just 3 homes. I think we need to look at this on a much broader perspective, just in what I could accomplish, you know, since this packet came out on Friday. I've talked to a few engineers, I've talked to a few cities that are in the process of purchasing back right-of-way that they vacated and now need because 25 years ago, they didn't anticipate what they would need. We have a governor who's pushing an initiative for active transportation, more trails, more bikeways. You know, we will never have it on Main Street. That's set, but we do have a little extra space here. And so I just inherently am not comfortable with giving up right-of-way because we don't know what we need 25 or 30 years from now.
Kevin, and maybe Corey seems like Corey's got something on his mind because he walked up here. But the other thought I had, and staff can speak to this, would be, this is obviously a street that's right a feeder to our city complex.
Right, and that is another thing.
I know it's not 4th East, I know it's not 4th West, but it does service our main city complex. Can you speak to that concern?
I'm going to let Corey talk
Okay.
about that a little bit
Okay.
more, just as,
Apparently, that wasn't the concern, because Corey's not leaping
Well,
up.
great. So Corey, maybe you have 2 concerns to speak to.
Well, that brings 3 for me.
Okay.
This latter one, The answer for today is there's no master plan that's looking at that. We don't have it on the master city park plan in the city hall area. We don't have it on a master plan street that 100 East would be expanded. So I recognize that 25 years from now, we might look at things differently on that, but we don't currently have plans in place for that.
And the only thing I would add to that is we're trying to do a new general plan. So while I'm not necessarily opposed to this 7 feet, I would rather wait and see what we do come up with when we redo general plan. We have not tied in our trails plan, we have not tied in our parks plan. I feel like there are so many missing pieces to our future planning that I'm not opposed to what they're asking for. I'm saying, why aren't we waiting so that we can have this opportunity to discuss and look at this and make sure that it does align with what we think the next 25 or 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, in recognizing that, that is true to think about that from a holistic perspective, because there's a number of issues. We have issues that there's no sidewalk sitting in the Old Town area, and there's some that want some sidewalk, those who don't want some sidewalk. We've not answered that, what would be previously termed as a complete street plan for the Old Town area. And do we want some community pathways going through those? Where would that be? Those are all kind of valid, issues to discuss on when you give up public property. Setting that aside and past looking at Old Town, to be fair, the 19 years I've been here, the process the city's chosen for Old Town is to do it a step by step. Now, whether that's the right way is debatable, but we have had other street vacations in Old Town where you're encroaching back in 50% of the front yard. The folks come in and say, I would like some of that yard space back. We've done some street vacations on this piecemeal basis. And again, not saying it's the correct way. That's been the traditional pattern that has taken place. And should we put a timeout to that is your issue with it. In putting a heel to that, if we do go to the the more procedural way you're talking about and looking at Old Town as a whole, now you're talking about a different animal that's taking place, because now the city is going to go in and do the master plan. And we have to decide who's going to do the survey work, who's going to do all of the engineering work, who's going to do all, and setting aside those funds and doing it holistically, which you can do. Centerville's not chosen that route because it's been put on the burden of the property owner to make those expenditures and come back and request the vacation. So it's just a matter of which process you want to take care of excess right-of-way. We do have excess right-of-way in there. It's significant in some streets. We only have a standard of 50 feet, not 60 feet or 66 feet, unless we're doing a collector and arterial type street. So that's the balance. You have those two. You want to do it the piecemeal way, and the burden relies on property owners to request it, and you make that decision, or do you want to be proactive and put together a holistic plan, and is it the best interest of the community as well as the financial interests of the city to bear that burden? So that's, either way is fine. I just think that you get to choose that route. I'm just giving you what we historically have done. The other item I would just want to be clarifying too is at development, it's not just at lot split. It's not just at subdivision. If that property, any of those properties are receiving and want to reformat their property, because some of it is single family, some of it is multifamily, if they came in to just do a site plan to add the allotted density that's on the property without subdividing, it would trigger the 10 feet to come in along the front property. So it's not just that subdivision. Now, the complex of why I'm even sat up here is the decision-making is right now we're vacating, I heard, about 7 feet of right-of-way. It was between 7 or 8, about 7 feet of right-of-way. We retain that easement at 7 feet. Let's just say that's the decision. It's still going to have to address the ordinance in the future to get the additional 3 feet. And so the question becomes back to the timing that I think our city engineer said. Do you need to do that under a street vacation to retain that easement? I'm not aware of an ordinance that says under the street vacation you have to retain the ordinance. I think staff is recommending a prudent route to say we may need some additional easement at some point in time to put in infrastructure. So an example is Utopia. Some of the cable companies will step behind the sidewalk and stay away from the gas lines that are sitting in the park strip, per se. And they'll start doing it. So, and there's a debate, should it be 10 feet, should it be 8 feet, should it be 7? We used to do 7 under the subdivision ordinance along the front of the street, now we boost it to 10. My gut feeling from a planner is if we just went in and used the 10-foot limit without using some limits in between, somebody's gonna scream, you're encroaching halfway into my 25-foot setback to do that, and I've invested a lot, so we usually try to stay closer to the sidewalk. But that, we do that. So the trigger is should we retain the 7 feet now and get the 3 feet later? Or should we not retain the 7 feet now and get the 10 foot if the property is redeveloped? And that's all pending this concept of should we be giving up any public property as part of the discussion. So I just wanted clarity at time of development that that 10 foot gets triggered in development of the property and its allotted uses, further development, or when it's subdivided.
Brant, do we have an overlay map of what the right-of-way looks like now, overlaid on what the as-is aerial plan, and then what it would look like if the right-of-way was granted, the vacation was granted?
Kevin, you
If you could pull up the city GIS,
can pull up the CGIS
That
and
would
we'll
show-
show you kind of where that is. But as far as an exhibit, we don't have an exhibit.
We don't have an exhibit?
So Gina, several years ago, way before I was on the council, there were people that came in and kind of wanted this whole thing fixed.
Exhibit.
And at that point in time, the city said it would cost us,
Right.
over $1 million.
I'm not suggesting
And
that.
so they came back, and, because there were people that needed it in order to be able to add on to their homes. So you kind of hate to say to somebody, you can't ever add on to your house because we're thinking about doing this. So it has been done several places, right, because I live right here. I know it was done up First North on 2nd East. They vacated and gave some property up there too. So this is kind of how it's been done around the neighborhood, is anybody that's going to make a change or needs anything has just came in and asked for that to be vacated. But then it does put the cost burden on them rather than the city, and so I think that's the advantage of it. I'm
not disagreeing with you. I think I do have a concern that this is our city complex road. It also has a school on it, so while there's not a lot of traffic, there can be parking depending on what's going on. And I just think I have, that.
But it still would
concern
go
as
to
well.
nowhere because you don't have it on the other lots. It's kind of weird because it goes from 100 North to 200 North, which is here, that doesn't even exist. And then you don't have it. We're not doing a whole block. So it's kind of like when people come in and say, do I have to put a sidewalk in? There's no sidewalk on this side of my lot and there's no sidewalk on that side of my lot. So we've given them so that they don't,
Variance.
so a deferment, so they don't
Deferral.
have to put their sidewalk in. But we always have the right to get back and say, yes, you have to put your sidewalk in. And I think that's kind of how this is. Even if we had it, we'd only have it for these 3 houses, and then it wouldn't go
So,
anywhere else.
Okay, so you're saying something, so just in all fairness, I have only had a bit of time, and one of the questions I asked Brant today is, isn't that 66-foot wide easement all across from Parish to?
No.
Because it seemed like it was that way in the report.
Well, and Kevin, that gets to a
So
question I was
that's where,
just gonna ask.
this is the problem I'm having, is I feel like we're looking at this tiny little area, and I need to see this area to understand it a little bit.
Right.
What's the right-of-way on the east side of 100 East?
so maybe zoom out, oh yeah, there you go. So the area that's not shaded, that's kind of the road width, is a 66-foot right-of-way that the city owns.
Okay, can
And-
you go point to that? I'm
And
sorry.
if,
I'm
yeah,
not-
maybe if
I'm-
there's another mic.
I am not oriented yet.
So city complex is up in the blue.
Okay, okay.
Okay, is this on? Good. So the property that's in question is basically from along the west side of First East from this northeast property corner down to, is this First North?
Yes.
Yes, and so as you can kind of see there, the sidewalk is here, the trees are kind of covered a little bit, but basically that dimension from back of existing sidewalk to this easterly line is about 7.5 feet. So it's really, in a lot of ways, you walk along there, you'd say, okay, that's probably considered their yard. I mean, they have trees and plants and whatnot along there. So that is city right-of-way again. And I believe the city owns this piece. If you could click on that piece.
The city
Yeah,
does,
they
they
do own
do,
that
that's why
piece.
I asked the question.
Yes, and so this is the 66 feet of right-of-way. If we took that dimension, probably 8 feet back a sidewalk, 7.5, 8 feet back a sidewalk. If you went 66 feet east, that would be our 66-foot right-of-way.
And that's why I'm asking that, Kevin, because now if you give up one side of the right-of-way, but not the other, then is it even more misaligned?
Well, really, you're lining it up with the infrastructure,
Okay.
if that makes sense. So you're really, our typical 50-foot right-of-way, you're 25 feet from center line of road to back a sidewalk. So that's our 50-foot right-of-way, typical city standard. If someone came in and developed a subdivision tomorrow with a residential street, we would require 50 feet of right-of-way, 25 feet each side of center line. So
But
that's
that would
really
tell-
what,
That argument would tell me I don't want to give the vacation because I want to align it better with infrastructure going south.
well,
of
let
100 north
me
Down to 100 east.
make sure that you understand. So we would have 25 feet approximately from center line to back of this walk is what we would end up with. These guys would have to come in if they wanted to clean up their side. As Corey mentioned, it's usually a piece by piece. Fortunately, these three folks have come in together on the same application, so at least you are cleaning up from, I believe that's the City Hall property to First North. So you are getting a pretty good chunk of that's probably 300 or 400 feet or so that's getting cleaned up.
Councilman Summerhays, if you were trying to reconstruct the road, because it is misaligned, that's what
Right,
you're
yeah,
noticing?
exactly.
If you were trying and thought that you were going to master plan and reconstruct that road, you would maintain that side of north of 100 North?
Correct.
Or you would acquire south?
Correct.
If you were trying to reline. So yes, it is already somewhat misaligned, and the question is should we keep it for any future realignment
Like,
issues?
if you do this, this leaves you less flexibility in the future. or
Right,
less
and
options.
I think that's been the question at staff level, we met, I think, even up to a year ago, is that something we see into the future? And at that meeting, so I'm qualifying it a year ago, at that meeting, staff didn't see the need to try to realign that intersection. Kevin?
Because
I don't know if
100
that
east.
continues.
100 east, south of 100 north is the full wider right-of-way that extends.
The 66 of the old
Yeah,
township
that
plan.
extends out onto, let's call it landscape areas.
Right.
Yeah, maybe let's take a look
And
at
again,
First
to my
North to
concern,
Parish Lane.
25 years
Yeah.
down the road or whatever, in terms of thinking about the city complex and maybe school access.
Yeah, let's
you-
zoom
if you
out
give
to,
that a
if you
big
take a
block,
look,
You lose your
if you,
flexibility.
let's go to First
do.
North to Parish Lane.
However, the flip side is that's not in any master plan.
Well, that's Gina's
But
concern.
what
that's
I'm-
my point,
yeah, but
is
my
our
point is-
general plan is not up to date.
But my point is that we cannot say, hey, we anticipate this outside of all planning processes and disadvantage homeowners who've made a good faith effort and made their payment for a vacation.
Well, I'm not saying we are anticipating something or we're not.
But,
saying-
no, I see what
I'm
you're
just
saying.
saying,
I
hey,
agree
I
with
just
you.
want to leave our options open,
I-
to Gina's
I
point.
understand that they've made the
Getting
payment
property
for
back
the vacation,
is a lot
but
more
that
difficult
does
than-
not entitle them to receive the vacation.
No, it's a vote of the council, but what
Right.
my point is that, and I don't disagree with the planning. Your statement when you said like, well, why don't we just wait and figure this out on a master plan? The first thing that came to mind was like, well, the Sixth Amendment guarantees speedy trial, which infers that processes of government should be speedy. This has been a long process for everybody involved.
This goes back 20 years.
This is
Yeah,
a-
but land issues aren't,
Well, what I'm saying is that.
are never
But
speedy.
cities don't
And
have to
development is
give
not
up
speedy.
right-of-way.
No, but what I'm saying is that this process has been a long process. I don't think that we're being fast about this. This has been going for a long time. So,
Let me maybe just show you, just so you get a feel for the entire block. So if we were to look at this block, we would look typically at from Parish Lane to First North. I know that there's a misalignment here, and there are on some of the other intersections as well, but if we look at the entire block from Parish Lane to First North, you can see that these folks, they own to the back of sidewalk. The school district here owns to approximately the back of sidewalk. The city, of course, this is city property along the city hall, but it also is typically to the back of sidewalk. So it's not like we are,
We're not
saving
aligning
this-
something with, to the north, you're not aligning it.
yeah, you're not
You actually
aligning
would be
it.
aligning it by granting the
Right.
application.
We're
be
really lining
consistent.
up this
Yes.
west side as best we can to Parish Lane,
Yeah.
is what we're looking at. I guess you could say, okay, if we wanted a wider trail along here at some time, you'd have to go and take, properties along there and get, I'm too far east, sorry.
And maybe to Robin's point, if you're
Yeah.
worried about school kids with sidewalks, they're gonna use the east side where there's already established sidewalks as well.
Oh, there's sidewalks
I
on
know,
both
I-
sides of the road.
I like
That's a
them to be
good,
able-
that's a good question. What is the safe route to school through this road? Do you know, Kevin?
Police chief might have a better
Do you
idea.
know-
Do you know what safe
They
routes
walk
to
down the
school
middle of the
is
road.
along,
Yeah, hang on just one second. Get that open.
I'm gonna get the chief involved here.
sorry, I was.
The safe route to Centerville Elementary School, the question was, where are they? Is that right?
Yeah,
Yes.
just between 100 and 200 north on 100 east, what is the safe route?
I know that we received a grant to put some sidewalk in along here, is this Second East? And there were some sidewalks put in along here that were safe sidewalks for schools.
But what if you live in
So
Robbins?
say the,
Well, I guess
perimeters
it would be
again,
Robin's house, but Robin's neighbor or Nancy's property. How are you getting to school from Nancy's
To
property?
the Smith property. yeah.
So there is sidewalk along
yeah,
this along this west
Yeah.
side and all
All the
along.
way?
Yeah, it goes all the way.
I don't know about the
So-
east side.
East
There might
side is
not be
missing just that corner lot.
Okay.
The east side, yeah.
Oh,
the
that's
SNAP,
right.
the SNAP plan doesn't go into ultra detail for every possible place within the city. And I don't believe the SNAP plan addresses from Nancy's house to the school. It would address more
More,
common routes where they collect and then start gathering for stuff.
What's the observed behavior? What do you see the kids doing in that area?
Usually they're walking along the street.
Okay.
admittedly, that's where I have always walked when I walk along there's the street.
Yeah.
And it's nice and pleasant, so.
Let me make this point while
You
I'm
wish you would
thinking
have had
about.
66 feet or 50 feet as a kid.
66 feet.
They take what they want.
No, you know where I stand.
Smaller, the
Easement
safer.
is.
Okay, how about let's let the applicant stand up and,
Kevin was not quite done.
oh, sorry, Kevin, I
I
apologize.
wanted to make just one more point
Okay.
before I forget. If this were an intersection similar to Fourth West and Main, or, I shouldn't say Fourth West, sorry, Fourth West and Parish, or Main Street and Parish, or even Fourth East and Porter Lane, I do think that we would be a little more cautious on vacating right-of-way. So we do look at that, and we are aware of where we need right-of-way. So, for example, when the Quick Quack came in, we wanted to get right-of-way from them because we knew we would need that for future widening. So, to your point, I do think we, as staff, are trying to be cognizant of where we might need future right-of-way.
And Kevin, you don't have any concern that you don't want that future right-of-way from a city complex standpoint. I know that we don't have it to the north of the complex on that side, but going south.
It's cool. It's like Kevin make those
Well,
decisions. I like it.
unless this,
No, I didn't say make the decision, I said from a city engineer standpoint,
from the way that this is zoned, unless this
because
area.
I can ask the same thing to Corey.
unless this area were rezoned to high density or some other zoning, I don't think for a residential neighborhood, you're gonna ever need more than 50 feet of right-of-way.
But keep in mind, if it's rezoned to high density, or even, we would require the developer to install that infrastructure to support that type of development.
Yeah, and I'm not even speaking.
So we
as-
wouldn't need to acquire
And
that
I'm not
right
even
away.
speaking that
Point of the
as
development.
it relates to a rezone of that property. I'm speaking to it as if we have a new public safety building or increased infrastructure here as the city grows.
Sure.
Do you need that extra right of way to service going
That right of way is
southbound
not gonna play any
for
role.
a future police access,
Can
public safety
can I channel
access?
Corey? He's gonna say, that's a policy decision. Did I get it right?
And I'm answering the policy. So there is going to be a need sometime in the future, probably not in my lifetime or yours, that there'll need to be a new city hall, and there's definitely a need for a new public safety building. If that is developed here on City Hall, let me just give you my fun vision, and that is the City Hall, and that's why we're trying to preserve this complex, because we can't buy land anymore. There's nowhere else to build. We'd rebuild it on this piece of property, right? So the public safety building and the City Hall would, I envision, being built on the current parking lot, and then this becoming green space and the parking going behind there. But that's not going to impact the police department if they're exiting onto 100 East, the wider the road, if that's going to create any detriment to, getting out onto 100 East. They're still probably going to try and get on 100, or on Main Street to the quickest route. And so more so what we'd be trying to ensure is the quick route to Main Street, because it's easier for them to go east-west, north-south from there, right?
So
So
Spencer,
this 7.5 feet is not going to play any role. And keep in mind also that if we were to try and realign this road, we would need to pay Rocky Mountain to to move the poles, to move the infrastructure. That's just too cost prohibitive for us. That would need to be a developer.
No, I'm looking at it from a
Right.
long-term development standpoint.
Well,
And we would require
That's
that
what I'm-
development to take care of those
if it
issues.
makes you feel any better, all of our staff met. I seen them. Kevin, Corey, Brant, Mike, the chief, all of them met, and they all felt good about us vacating
You were in
it.
this meeting? and
No, I
wasn't?
was not.
She was spying on
I
us.
was spying, no, and it was before you were even on the
She has
council.
a GPS tracker
I
on
was
me.
driving down the road and I stopped to see what was going on and I was told to keep on moving. But, so I was not allowed. I was, no, I left. So afterwards, I talked to them and it was a consensus, so you're asking to ask all these people,
Well, and
all of
that's why I
them.
asked my original question. like,
Right, but
staff.
so they all
Obviously,
met
staff
up
is
there
recommending
together
it.
and all of the staff agreed that there was not a problem with vacating this piece of property.
Okay, but, based on that was our initial conversation. Again, let's qualify it, as Corey stated, this is a year and a half ago. There's been a lot of conversation since then, where it's gone from yes to possibly saying, no, we recommend the city not give up this property because of our standing position that we should not give up any key property in corridor preservation. There's been a lot of conversations internally that has gone the entire spectrum, right, that we've discussed every side. And that's where we've really come down to this, is saying, look, at 7.5 feet, preserve the easement, and whatever the case might be, that the 10 feet, the extra 3 feet in the later, or there's an ordinance amendment where we change it from 10 to 7, and there's no need for any future easement, but that's why we're recommending, let's pretend, preserve the easement. We don't need the property. It's still a safe road. Now, keep in mind that the planners say, and I don't know if this is true, Corey, but the planners say that the narrower the road, the safer the
Safer it
road,
is.
right?
I
So if there's a
agree with
need
that.
for us, if we're looking at potentially a future multi-purpose trail to have an active transportation plan through the city, we don't necessarily need to acquire anymore. We just actually need to, we'll narrow the road a little bit. It takes away the on-street parking. I mentioned this, Councilmember Hurst, earlier, when my grandma lives behind the Ogden Temple, 2155 Grant Avenue. They did that. They put in this multi-purpose trail with a drainage. So it removed the parking, which is awful when we have Sunday dinners over there. But it's safe, and it's really neat to have that multi-purpose trail. And people really are careful behind the temple when they drive, because it's narrow.
But to your point on that particular project, I do have some knowledge of that project because our engineering firm did that. And there were some very extremely tight points in that project.
Or the crosswalk to the
which
temple is pretty tight.
Nobody 25 or 50 years ago anticipated. It was historic, Ogden, and So that is my concern, is that we don't know what we need, because our lives are changing, just like when there were horses and buggies here, they couldn't have ever anticipated cars and bikes and pedestrians all moving at the same time.
But I just don't think we can tell everybody that lives in Old Historic Centerville, no, you can't add on to your house because in 50 years, we might need that 7 feet. Nope, you can't have that building lot because
I
that.
respectfully just disagree with that, because
I just don't see that we inconvenience hundreds of people on the chance that we're gonna need 3 or 4 pieces of
but
that.
thus far, we haven't inconvenienced anyone other than, I mean, I respectfully realize these people would like this property, but I just inherently disagree. I want to give them a chance to, I mean, they may say something that will change my mind, but I do want to ask the chief while he's standing there, could I ask you, what's your thoughts? Let's just say, crazy enough, there ends up being a public safety building and you are now exiting out on 100 East.
So, let me first, real quick, we checked the SNAP, and the SNAP does call, it is part of the safe route from 100 North along 100 East to the school. So that's where it starts, at 100 North, on 100 East, goes directly to the front of the school. So just wanted to
Which
clarify
side,
that.
east
Which
side or west
side,
side?
east or
It
west?
doesn't designate,
Okay.
Just
Both
specifies the
sides
street.
doesn't
does.
specify, yeah.
Okay.
So, as far as from a public safety point of view and police officers leaving their parking lot to go to a call, we're assuming that they would be responding to a call towards the east side of the city. It would be most accessible by driving through the parking lot, which is not nearly as common as it would be exiting to Main Street and usually heading down on Parrish. If I could see that there was a potential for a lot of extra homes and development and so forth going on to the east of us, then I would say that our frequency of exiting and going east would increase. But I just don't see where there's going to be more people, more houses, more stuff that would drive more calls for us to leave the parking lot and go east. So I don't really think that there would be a change in what we're dealing with now with the width of the street.
So, but let's just say there's no access to Main Street.
Okay?
I mean, I kind of just taken Brandt's example, not that it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But you have a green space here and there isn't an access point out.
Sure.
I don't know if that's a possibility or not. Maybe that's
Doesn't
nuts
even-
to not.
I'm sorry, but that doesn't even make sense. Why would you do that and
You
not
put
have
a-
access?
Okay, but see,
Why not?
let me extend that. You put a green space there because you have your west side development and your public safety is actually on your west side. So, I mean, you can play the scenario either way. From my perspective, if you were gonna build a public safety building and we do end up with a huge, transit-oriented development, statistics would probably tell you you'd want your public safety building closer to that end of town, because that's probably where you're gonna see your crimes of
Okay.
opportunity.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, this
So-
is the problem when we look at the crystal ball, it's never
But
very
are-
clear.
Okay, but based on that, Chief, do you feel like the public safety building needs to be somewhere else? I mean, we own property here.
Ideally, the new public safety building would be better positioned somewhere along Parish Lane, I think, 400 West-ish area, ideally. But that doesn't mean that this location isn't bad. We're 3.5 miles wide, wide and, a little over a mile deep. So no matter where we are, we're gonna not be that far from any call, but ideally, down there would be better.
When you say down there, east or
Parish-
west of I-14?
East of I-15,
Okay.
east of I-15, for sure. Kind of where the Zions Bank building is, that general area would be
Back to where
ideally,
it came
You like
from.
that spot, huh, chief?
yeah, I kind of wish we'd have had that
Okay,
before,
place marker, duly noted.
yeah. So,
All right, let's let our applicant, do you want to make any comments, or
You can open the public hearing first, or?
Or it's applicant then public.
applicant, then public hearing? So,
Well, Mayor Pro Tem, and then again, council members. Thank you. for your service, and thank you for putting this on the agenda tonight. And staff, appreciate the comments that staff has made in clarifying the request. And I just want to clarify and make sure that you understand that back of curb, the city currently has more or less a 4-foot park strip and a 4-foot sidewalk. And the request is for the 8 feet beyond, which is currently 16 feet owned by the city. Is that your understanding? Okay. And I don't really know what to say other than I do appreciate the staff backup report. I was a little bit surprised to see the recommendation to keep the 8-foot as a city utility easement, primarily for 2 reasons. In the 22 months that we've talked about this, that never came up. Would we have proceeded forward? I don't know, but we didn't have that opportunity to know that ahead of time. It was always just, nope, we don't think we need it. This looks like a go. In fact, at one time, the city was going to actually bear the cost to look at that vacation in the very beginning, and that has evolved over time to where it was going to be split 3 ways, and part of that was for a reason that is not even on the agenda tonight, and that was because you have your town site map, but that road never opened up according to the town site map, which brought into question, did the city really own it, or was it just held in trust? And so that has been the long debated question, and was there clear title or not? I appreciated Kevin's comments, and the predecessor to Kevin actually came out and wrote a letter and indicated that the city didn't have clear title to anything other than a 50-foot wide road. So based on a lot of that and discussions with staff and staff's feelings at the time, we decided it was worth it to come up with the money, pay for a survey and the fee, and proceed forward. So it was a little disappointing to think that the city would request to keep that easement, especially in light of the fact that one of the state requirements is to get easements releases from every utility provider, which we did, and none of the utility providers indicated they had any interest in that or any need for that. So it seems to be contrary to the state statute in a way to require that if it's not going to be vacated free and clear of any encumbrance. Just a thought, that's how it came across to me. If the city's going to keep that, then why do we have to get these easements from every other city or every other utility provider saying they don't care, they don't need it? That would be one point that I would make on that. I do agree that it's not going to matter whether the city has 16 feet or 8 feet as far as safety, because the kids are going to walk down the middle of the street. That's just what they like to do, because usually you have, even I walk down the middle of the street and I have a sidewalk. So I don't know that that is the issue. It will be a safer and a quieter street if that is kept at a 50 wide street. There's no question about that. It does align with the rest of the street going north as far as on the west side. So I don't know if you have any specific questions for me.
I do. Have you seen what's what's in our packet?
Yes, I did pull that up today, so.
I have a reason I'm asking. I just noticed in the email that you had sent that you said you had sent a packet of information to 3 of the council members I don't believe I have that packet. I
Right.
don't know that that was included in the city.
No, and that speaks back to what I was trying to say in the beginning, that this goes back 22 months, long before you were voted into office. It was an issue, and Brant and the petitioners decided that we wouldn't continue to make that a part of the petition. We would try to keep it clean and on the merits of, if we were doing a vacation, like anywhere else in the city, it would be done on those merits. And I guess my feeling on that was one of the reasons we agreed to do that rather than dredge up, does the city have clear title, do they not, was in all the years I lived here in the old town site, I have never seen a 16-foot or a 10-foot easement being required after a street vacation. And in fact, the whole time I served on the council, we never requested anything more than an 8-foot, I should say 8-foot if I said 6-foot, more than an 8-foot easement. And so, looking at that in its totality, I don't know that we've changed that much as a city to require more than an 8-foot in the old town site. Especially, and Robin pointed out, or I should say Councilmember Meekum pointed out, I have a neighbor to the east, a neighbor to the south, 2 neighbors to the south that have all vacated, and the city only required an 8-foot easement. So,
When you say
I don't wanna-
8 foot, you mean back of curb to back of sidewalk?
right, yeah. And so that's why we're
Did I just-
requesting that.
Did I hear that? So was there information that was sent to other council members that I didn't
No,
get?
we
received?
received.
2 years ago.
We received that
Okay.
2 years, so all the council, 2 years ago, we received it, but it wasn't on vacating the street, it was on whether we actually had clear title and ever even really owned that property.
Okay.
Because she had a lot of information that showed,
We're talking about an oldie though.
right, well, it's not an,
Is that what
yeah,
you're referring to, Sheena?
Pretty much,
Yeah, I think that's what she's saying to me.
yeah, pretty much.
When I asked
yeah.
about it, I think that's what you were saying. That's how I interpreted, so. Okay.
I received the packet, but it was close to 2 years ago, I believe. Sure.
Better part of.
Yeah. So, I guess, again, we don't feel it's unreasonable based on what's happened going into this with the understanding and, again, what Corey and Kevin have said. That's what has been indicated for the past 22 months. So we just move forward with good faith that that was not an issue for this area. Okay? Any other questions?
Do if the rest of you want to comment or?
They told me, yeah.
I know you're all applying, so.
I
You're
do
very-
appreciate that as applicants, you came in together so that there's a
Yes.
clean line.
Makes
Yeah,
it, that's
yeah.
Do we
one line.
need, do we need for the record that they're here to want that, or is that?
It's not necessary.
Okay.
But thank you for asking them, because I kept asking them too.
So,
Just wanted to make sure they were comfortable with what.
Thank you.
while we're waiting on other public comment, could you bring up,
We gotta open
haven't
the
opened it
public
yet.
yeah,
hearing
yeah,
first.
I guess
Should
we
we
do
do
have
that?
to do that. Yeah, motion to open the public hearing.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the public hearing is open.
So while we're waiting for the public to comment, Jennifer, can you bring up, Utah Code annotated the 10-9A 609.5 petition to vacate public
this-
street?
Is this in our package?
Should be in
George?
our
I believe
packet,
it is,
yeah.
right?
Because what I wanted to go down to is basically the decision criteria that's listed in state law that we're to use,
Okay,
which is the section 4A and B of that.
okay. Anything else, or do you just want us to? look
Well,
at it?
I'm just, when we're done with public comment, and then when we close
Okay.
that.
Perfect. We don't appear to have any public comments here. Is there anyone online?
So a motion to close the public hearing?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, public hearing is closed. Okay, George, go ahead.
So for us, from a criteria perspective, and this is where we've got to get down to what is the what is the theoretical, what is in black letter? In black letter, it says that the legislative body may adopt an ordinance granting petition to vacate some or all of a public street or municipal utility easement if the legislative body finds that good cause exists for the vacation, and we can debate that. We've heard staffs mention things either way. Neither the public interest nor any person will be materially injured by the vacation. So we have to define what is a material injury for the public entity. And this is where we get into the policy, and the difference is I don't see a material injury for a future plan that doesn't exist. If we had it on plan and we said we're vacating it, that's a material injury to the city. And this is where I'm kind of looking at this as a two-phase problem to me. One, everything's legal until it's not legal, right? So you have to legislate to the point of where you control the action that you want. In this particular case, this may be a catalyst for pushing forward the plan. To me, staff has made a pretty good cause saying we're aligning with what's existing on that same side of the street as we go up the property line. So I think that's pretty doable from my perspective. I can say, yep, that aligns with everything else I see on the existing map. The issue about material injury, I don't think we can say there's material injury to the city because it's not in any planning documents yet. Philosophically, I agree with you.
Well,
but
the material
I think-
injury is to the person, not necessarily, it says
the public interest,
Yeah, I don't think,
or the person.
I don't think what
Okay,
Gina's
yeah.
saying, George, is that
I-
it's to item B. It's more A, good cause exists. There may not be good cause to exist for the vacation if we want to retain that for some future need.
but then we have to balance that against what's already existing on the map. And on the map,
I
we already
agree.
have everybody north has that same.
Yes, and
So that's what I'm saying, good
extremely
cause.
persuaded by that.
Yeah, to me, that's the persuasion, but I'm trying to bolster what Gina's saying in terms of like the public interest potentially isn't being met for future planning, but we don't have the planning to back up the future interest, which is that's the rub, that when we do budget this year, we should be advancing the planning efforts to allow us to be able to say, going forward, you have that. In this case, ship's already sailed as far as I'm concerned. I don't really have I can't say, because we want to plan for something in the future, I'm going to prevent you from having access to the same sort of property line easement that exists everywhere else. I can't make that argument for myself. If I had a plan that backed it up, I certainly could.
I hear what you're saying, and I'm not an expert on the law, and I wish Lisa was here to help us through this. I would view it differently if this were a zoning issue, but we're talking about a right-of-way issue. And that's where I have the concern, is that I think this is slightly different. And I totally want to just say to these guys, I totally respect what you're saying, that you have gone out and expended money. And I don't want to be disrespectful of that effort or make a big mountain out of a molehill for you guys, because this really maybe isn't an issue for this street. I am just looking, probably not your fault, but holistically looking at it and going, do we want to open this can of worms? Because it will trickle down and impact other things. And yes, we are putting it on the homeowners to pay that.
But that's what the city decided to do, and they opened this can of worms
But-
many years ago. Like I said, I know that the Call property up on Second East was given, so the can of worms is already open. If you want to set precedents, I can tell you several people in the area. So we're not opening the can of worms. I feel good about it because our staff feels good about it. This was close, I live close to this, and so I was concerned. I didn't want to make one decision one way or the other. I wanted to make sure I was being fair and being very educated on it. But when every member of our staff came forward and said, we feel fine with it being vacated, none of us can see a reason why not to vacate it. But then they found some good reasons to vacate it, to clean it up, and so that's what made me feel comfortable, because I did think I needed to err over on the safety side because it was my neighborhood. And that's what made me feel comfortable I feel like they all know more than I do, so.
Okay, and I'm not suggesting that that's not the case, but I don't know, Brent, how long were we on the phone today? I didn't have a chance to
2 or
talk
3
to
minutes.
Corey or 2 or 3 minutes, come on. I didn't have a chance to talk to Brandon or Corey. You guys have had more time
Right.
to process this, so
Right.
maybe I should make a motion and suggest, could we table it for a couple of weeks so I can have a little more time to process through? I mean, it's been 20 years, right? I mean,
That's why I hate to put it off any longer.
I understand that, but I'm asking for a couple of weeks, not 20 years. I'm just,
I would like to
so
take it.
to understand your tabling motion, what do you hope to obtain that would change or,
I wanted to do a little more research on, what cities are doing with these 66-foot wide easements. I need to understand this town site thing a little better. I don't want to, I do agree that the city has made a decision to look at this on an individual basis. There is still a holistic look that needs to be reviewed. And I feel strongly about that because right-of-way is a big deal. Not because I'm trying to tell them no, I just want to make sure that we're going about this right.
I see your point, I really do. I think my concern is that where we're dealing with a specific piece of law, our consideration is this vacation. I don't know that we can make a legitimate argument that says public interest against the entire town site represents this particular issue. I mean,
I think we're taking it.
That's where I need to talk to
Yeah.
Lisa about that. So,
but, and this is the fun part.
because none of us are expert in this.
But we've talked to Corey, we've talked to Kevin, we've talked to Mike, we've talked to the chief, we've talked to Brent, so we've talked to our experts. I mean, there's not anybody you could call that would say, in our area, this isn't what we would do. I mean, that, I understand, because I have been dealing with this. I mean, I've heard about it for 20 years, so I obviously have more. But I'm okay to do a vote tonight. I feel like.
Corey, can we borrow you for a second? You get to play Lisa tonight, too.
Are you okay with that, Corey? I'm already asking that question.
I told her that we would all pitch in, so I appreciate the backup.
So,
Does my salary change if I'm
Yes,
playing
it
like
does.
this?
That's a good question.
unfortunately, it will not be enough to affect
Your
your
hours
Tier 1
increase
status.
40 hours a week, so yeah.
It's your top 3 years, so don't worry about it. Okay, so.
That's true.
Corey, as you've listened to our debate and the sticking points that some of us have, myself included, I'm not singling you out, we have different sticking points. Is it appropriate for us to attempt to look holistically at the entire town site against one vacation? Does that, in your opinion, put us in any jeopardy playing lawyer tonight? If we were to grant this vacation tonight and say, we're good, does that open up issues for us one way or another?
We'll answer like I play a doctor on TV.
Absolutely.
No, the answer is, it's public property right now, so there's no obligation for you to give it up. What the state law says, if you decide to do it, this is the process that we want you to go through, and we don't want you to give it up if you do find a material injury and all those things. But there's no, putting in the attorney hat, there's no obligation to vacate public property. These are the state guidelines that say if and when you receive a petition, that petition is assuming that it's coming from the private sector to the public sector, and then you're putting your hat on and saying, okay, if this is a request, let's make sure that we're not injuring someone if we do this. But I don't see under the law, there's an obligation to give up public property. You have the issue that you can do an ordinance to vacate it. These are your findings because you're saying we're giving up the public property and we've decided nobody's materially injured. And so you're making that finding of why it is. So that if somebody comes back and tries to say I was materially injured, they're going to make the argument of when you found that they weren't materially injured, how did you justify that? Because somebody's now claiming a material injury to you. That's what so an easement holder is somebody that can come in and say you damaged this by giving up this public property. But there's no obligation to give up public property. So the attorney hat is, it's really just that petition that when you're receiving it, you're saying, okay, I'm going to give up the public property for the public purpose because of A and B. That's my attorney hat, but
That's pretty good.
Practicing law without a license right there.
I think it was
And
pretty good.
Corey, let's put you in the role that you are paid to do. As a planner, throughout this discussion, and I think other council members get the feel for where I'm coming from. I don't know what I don't know, looking out into the future, right? We don't know what a block, one street off of Main Street is going to look like 10, 25, 50 years down the road. And that's why we do have maybe a planner that helps us think out long term. Is it always going to look this way? Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. But we don't know what at least I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what the future of development of the city site looks like. I don't know how future societal changes might affect our land use decisions. You know, you may have a police chief, you may have a public works director, a city manager, a city council out years and saying, why did we give up land? At the same time, I can argue the other side and say, are you just holding on to land just to hold on to land that could be, I don't know how these property owners are going to use it. You know, and again, we're not obligated to vacate property. We don't have to give up property. With that said, that's why I've peppered so many questions to staff, because they're the ones that are recommending this, and we get the ultimate decision. But I think I've tried to rely on staff during my first year as a council member to say, hey, give us your professional opinion. So, Corey, back to your true professional hat on, 25, 50 years down the road, as a planner, are we making a mistake that a future council or future citizens or future staffers may say, why did they do that? I don't want to have to go back to these property owners and do a condemnation or an eminent domain on this.
good points, and, you know, putting on the planner hat, we're doing as much educated guessing into the future as we can do, too. I kind of go back to the police chief and a little bit of Kevin. We're dealing with a residential neighborhood, which holistically, I think, is going to have a life survival still long into the future. I don't see us really going into the neighborhood. Now, historically, to this neighborhood, it started out as a duplex zone.
Right.
And it's been changed through time down to the single family. And we had a conservation of uses for anybody had a certain 2-year period to file for a duplex certificate, and anybody didn't, it expired. It didn't even grandfather it at that point in time. So we've downzoned to single family neighborhood historically. The question is will we now start upzoning into the future? And I think generally with the investment and the prices and the life expectancy of even some of the older homes, even the 1950s homes, you still probably see more of the bash and build to a single family than you're likely to see a holistic change to the single family neighborhood. Our standard of 50-foot wide streets, that's on from a planner's perspective, that's on a little bit the lower side of a right-of-way. Typically, you're going to see 60 feet in a lot of communities and not the 50 feet. So the 50 feet is on the lower end spectrum of what local roads are out there. But at the same time,
The planner may argue that adds to the charm of the Old Town site, right?
that's the next comment. At the same time, though, I think the Old Town Center has a uniqueness into the future where we're probably going to look at preserving the core of that neighborhood. It's the Dual Creek Historic District sitting there right now. There's ideas to try to celebrate that. We've never really come to a good fruition of what's happening there. And I think the no sidewalk issue is some find that charming because it has a more closer suburban rural than, a suburban to a larger community feel to it, and they don't want sidewalks in there. I think if you widen roads within the neighborhood, because we have some wide right-of-ways that sit from the Old Town Plat. That goes to your question, what was the Old Town Plat? They were large. That was just the way LDS church influence planning occurred. You needed the 18 oxen wagon to spin around in Salt Lake, so you had the wide streets. I think that would be damaging to the neighborhood in the long future to try to widen the roads and make them bigger, because then you're increasing traffic. I think where you're sitting at 100 East, if I'm giving the tension of whether we should be preserving it outside of the discussion that we're having, now is what is Main Street? Because there's been a long policy standard to limit Main Street influence to the half block of the neighborhood. And we're sitting at the block distance to the neighborhood. And so if you're thinking 50 years from now, and what is South Main Street, and this would offend anybody for the last 30 years, and that's what planners do best, is that should that be widened to one block in the need for redevelopment? And I think that would have a huge potential contentious, discussion there. And so I think the long future of needing a 60-foot right-of-way is more in the moot question, and the 50-foot is probably okay in the planner perspective of that neighborhood.
Thanks, Corey. I think for the council's benefit, I don't know when or how a motion goes, but going into the meeting, I was staunch. You just don't give up anything from staff's input. I'm more leaning towards an approval of the recommendation as it stands.
I think I've been pretty transparent about that. I mean, I just don't see this having much utility to us, because if we were going to do something bigger, we'd need more property than what's there and where they're aligned. I just don't,
It's enough room for a bike trail,
yeah, we got that section on the other side we own.
but they might come to us.
But here's the thing.
Now, that's an actual
that's a-
parcel.
Yeah, but see, that argument for a bike trail would have been the same rationale. We should have held on to the 16 feet between the two properties, because that could have been opened up as
No,
a bike
because
trail.
It didn't go anywhere. It went into their yards.
It goes through the block, though.
Goes through the block.
It
So
went
you
from
could have
one
said-
street to the other.
Straight.
Yeah, it goes street to street, so you could have put a bike trail through there.
But it
So-
had different,
But it was a
That's
bike,
That's not an
Yeah.
existing road. This is
it had a
an
land use,
existing road.
different
No,
land use
but
precedent.
what I'm saying is this is the joy of trying to
Don't
plan.
stretch it, George.
Yeah, I'm just trying to say, this is the joy of planning, and it is how do we make that determination? It does come down to a policy decision. From my perspective, I don't see that the public interest is significantly changed by aligning the block so it's the same all the way up and down. To me, it's that classic, who cut the cake wrong, and now I gotta fix it, which means I have to eat that part of the cake. So in this particular case, let's clean up the edge. I do think, though, that it is definitely a catalyst for that battle cry to Corey and others about how do we accelerate the planning process so that we don't have to be arbitrary or make every policy decision up on a case-by-case basis. If we had planning we
Right.
could fall back
I feel like we're
to,
doing
makes it
parking,
easier.
this opens up the parking modification that the planning commission has.
Well, it is, it's that same issue. It's just like, how do we, but for this one seems pretty cut and dry to me.
Well, and the other thing that made me feel comfortable a long time ago when we were first looking at this was when Corey said to me, if this redeveloped into something totally different, the developer would have to give the property back and start all over and put his own roads back in. So if this were to totally change its dynamic in this area in 100 years and all be something different, and they came in and they would have to put in a new road, they would have to give the property back to the city anyway.
But I'm not thinking about necessarily, like, I completely agree. I don't think our town site area is changing anytime soon. But active transportation is changing. And Corey said, 60 feet is probably a little more of a comfortable width. You're cutting it down to 50, which is a little on the low side. So that's my concern. We don't really have an option to put, bike paths on Main Street. It's too narrow. But a lot of people walk and bike through the old town site, including myself.
In the middle of the road.
And I'm not suggesting that it won't just stay that way.
That's what, to me,
Sorry, Corey, I got one more question for you. You get to play planner and lawyer.
I was just gonna ask him another question, George, but
Go for
not
it.
a legal question, a planning question.
Go for the planning one
How many,
first.
how many 50-foot right-of-way streets do we have in our city?
That's the majority of our streets.
Okay, thank you.
So where you stated earlier that redevelopment, subdivision, trigger the easement why do we have this specification in the quitclaim deed referencing the Utah code that we need it? It seems like we're vacating and putting an encumbrance at the same time.
Well, I wasn't drafting the report for the easement. I think the easement's being preserved because at some point in time, there's probably going to be development, so why give that up now when we can maintain some of it today? But this is a discussion I had with Councilmember Meekum earlier, as she says, do we need that easement? And I'd say, no, there's no rule that says we need the 10-foot easement now. It will happen at the time of site plan approval or development, because that is a standard to develop, to further develop the property. So the 10-foot's going to come in at some point in time unless we change it to 7 feet or so. Do we need it now? The answer is I don't see there's impetus now unless we're trying to make some type of connection. And that's the risk factor about the materially injured, and this is where I'll agree with Councilmember McEwen is that I don't see that we can make a finding that anybody's materially injured at this point in time. Even if we think that there might be an extension, we don't have a city master plan, we don't have a street master plan, so then I agree with the component of that nobody's materially injured, and to think that we are, I don't think that finding can be made there. So,
But that is the recommendation, right?
yeah, the recommendation from the whole staff is we're, it's like the sidewalk issues, and this is where, staff has disagreed with the council a few times on the deferral agreements. We piecemeal the sidewalk in place. And, basically we're trying to say, we don't want to piecemeal the future easement in place, let's preserve it now. My take is a little bit nuanced. It's 10 feet now, we're only asking 7. So I heard the term 8, so are we at 8 or are we at 7?
Well, it was 8 feet, it's approximately 8, so
Okay.
with the legal description it said.
So there'll be an 8-foot easement, so 2 feet would be acquired at some point in time, but you're preserving the 8 foot if something in the interim needs to be connected, like a Utopia line or something of that nature. And I think that's what staff is trying to say is, look, we're willing to give it up for the measurement of setbacks, we're willing to give it up so you get more square footage to density, but we want to preserve where another potential utility might occur. And I don't think that's unreasonable either, to preserve the easement into the future. My perspective is if we're worried about the 10-foot and the standard, we'll get it when they want to redevelop the property. And until then, we just figure out the...
By ordinance, so it's not like you can waive.
So we could go ahead and vote on this but then change it to where we're not giving the,
You sure can.
Well,
But again,
that's
we're
what-
just trying to think ahead and.
right,
Yeah,
right,
that's what
but
I'm
where
trying to-
we're gonna get the 10 anyway.
Well,
go
that's
from
what I'm trying to
7
split this, that's what I'm trying to split this up and make sure I understand compartmentalizing what we're doing. Because the quitclaim, that's an easy transaction for me.
Right.
I understand that. But now we're tacking on, hey, we're gonna hold on to an easement. Is the easement recorded and existing today?
No, it'll be
So-
traded from ownership to an easement holder.
So that is part of the problem is that to me, those are two separate transactions and we should probably handle them as separate transactions. And maybe I'm looking at that incorrectly.
No, it would be just 2 transactions. One is contingent upon the other.
Correct. One's a quick claim and one's an easement.
One's a quick claim and the other one limits the
But the
quick claim.
ordinance just has them together in the same.
Yeah. But there'll be
Why don't
a
we vote on
vacation
the
of the
quick claim
property, so it goes
first?
private, but there'll be a re-recording of the narrative for the easement.
No, you want
It
both.
isn't prepared that way.
He just said we could vote for it without the easement on it.
Why don't you want, I want both.
You want
I
the
don't-
easement on it?
Yeah, I mean, for the reason staff is.
Well, staff just said, he just said there was no reason for
Corey
it.
said
But
that,
it's
but
still a recommendation.
Yeah, I'm-
Yeah.
Saying it's
My,
not.
mine saying is there's no ordinance that says it right now. I don't find any, from a planning perspective, the need to preserve it. And if we need it in the future, we can get it through to redevelopment
but why
of
did
the
why did
property.
Lisa draft it that way is the question.
Right, because it's like, this
I-
seems like we already have it somewhere else.
So I'm kind of deferring, what I'm getting at, Robert, I'm deferring to, in Lisa's absence, I'd rather defer to her recommendation.
Yeah, I
To
think
go
the,
rogue on our own.
Well,
I think
I've already
staff's
talked to
position is
Lisa,
we're gonna give up ownership so that you can count it towards
I see,
your
I understand what
setback.
Corey's saying.
You
Corey's
can
saying
mow
the
it.
ordinance-
We're gonna
You
get
can
it
take care of
anyway.
it, but if we need it to put in a utility line,
got
we
Kevin
Kevin
roaming
coming.
up.
I like it.
Wow.
An hour and a half into this. Thinking.
I'm not gonna play attorney, but the easement did come from the engineer department because we're typically the ones that are saying, hey, look, we like to have utility easements. Typically, we would back of sidewalks, so I just didn't want you to think that that was coming from Lisa because
Well, that didn't come from me.
That came from me, so.
So you want it, Kevin?
Well, again, it's
Already said he doesn't
typical
need
that we would have one. If this goes and develops, we're gonna get it eventually. So
So why did you want it in there in the first place?
if it doesn't develop, we would want it.
Okay, I think that's the
That's-
reason.
So I'm,
So we
That
definitely
is.
want it in.
well, no, I'm
He's
more
always-
comfortable in removing it, and if it develops, you get it in.
Get it. He said if it doesn't develop, he doesn't need it.
Well, no, it's
If it
something
doesn't
we would
develop
like
it,
to have.
We may still need it.
If it develops, we're gonna get it, but if it doesn't develop, we would typically like to have
Correct.
an easement back
If
of
it doesn't
sidewalk.
develop, you still may want that, Robert. That's what. the
It's a
point
corner lot, and corner lots has two frontage, and so you still want to preserve that. Again, we're losing the right-of-way, as we, throughout the old town site, we own the property through the right-of-way where we could run our utilities. We're losing that ability by giving up this property,
So
this right-of-way.
let me try this in a different way, and because we're debating it, I think it's easier if I just state this let me see if, I'm gonna, because I haven't looked at all of the quick claims, I'm assuming it's the same
Are
language.
you going to try a motion?
I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna try
I
a
do
motion.
try a motion.
It's still, so one item that does need the approval to be a condition upon, Kevin's currently reviewing the legal description, and there might be some tweaks to the legal, if you want to.
Oh, I don't even want to go there yet. I want to just deal with the quitclaim deed itself as far as its text. So what I want to do is I want to motion
All right.
that the three quitclaims terminate their text after more or less, so after the legal meets and bounds description for what the quitclaim is. So the pursuant to Utah Code annotated, that paragraph is removed from all three. That would be my motion. That splits it into the two.
I'm not
The
feeling,
two motions?
No, I'm saying into the, I still think we're conflating two different things, the quitclaim and the easement. I'm saying if you take if after the legal meets and bounds description, that's the end of the document as far as from, we don't need the pursuant to Utah Code, that paragraph, that's what I'm trying to amend out. That kind of brings this whole issue to a head, is like, are we talking one, or are we talking two? So I'm asking to amend all three to remove that paragraph.
Okay, so I'm kind of forming this on the spot, so be patient with me. But we just talked about the power poles. Let's just say it doesn't develop, it just stays as is. Why would we not want that easement? You mentioned the windstorms and the power poles coming down. What if we do get to the point where we start burying some of that? What if Rocky Mountain Power decides they're gonna, I don't understand all that, so I'm not even gonna profess to, but
They already have an easement.
They already have the easement to do it.
they're okay.
But no, there's no easements, and that's what we're saying, this is Old Town, there's
Yes.
no easement. We own the right-of-way, which is essentially protects the easement.
I'd like to make a motion.
Well,
Wait a minute.
I made a motion, is there a second, I guess, is the question. Does anyone want to even vote
Yeah, I
on
think
it?
I would second.
With that?
I would second.
And I'm not comfortable with that
I'm
one. I
not
mean,
either. I
I'd
don't-
rather,
I'm really worried about.
I'm focused on following staff right now. I don't want to go off road and try to play attorney where that's frankly not my,
So,
And you can delay and table this until an attorney is available.
Well, we have a motion up.
Well, let's debate the motion. I mean, Bill, you were
I
going to
don't know why
say
you
something.
wanted,
We
why
debated
you're
this
intent on
in-
removing that language, George.
Because I see them as two different things, and we're going to get it if we ever need it anyway.
You're not if they don't redevelop.
If they don't redevelop, you don't have the easement.
don't
That's
get
why
it.
Kevin.
They don't need it.
And Kevin says they don't need it if they don't redevelop. See, to me, it's like a tomato-tomato problem. If they don't redevelop, you don't need it. If they
You don't know what
redevelop,
you
you're going to
may-
get it.
Kevin, can you address?
Kevin is saying you still want it if they don't.
Yeah, so we were talking about 7 feet, 8 feet. It's, the dimension right now on the legal description that's been provided is about 7.5 feet. So we own 7.5 feet back of sidewalk. We vacate that. We would like that 7.5 feet to be a public utility easement.
For what reason? That's the question that we're.
We get communication lines sometimes that come in, gas lines that like to go back a sidewalk. There's power poles in the park strip right now. So a lot of times these, especially these directional drilling companies that come and bore what we call dry utilities, they like to go back a sidewalk. Power is another one that likes to go
That's what
back
I'm
a
getting at,
sidewalk.
George. That's why I want to keep the easement there.
But, and I understand that, but I'm like, I can't anticipate a utility, I mean, that area's already
That's
done.
precisely why you have it there.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying, it's that all utilities are already there. I mean, I just,
Except for if they decide to bury the power line.
So I have a
They've already got-
question.
Or do work otherwise.
I have a question. Didn't the applicant have to go to all the utilities and ask if they had any need to be in
They're
that?
required to notify is the statute. Required
Do
to
they
Yeah,
have
for
to sign
existing
or say
utilities.
anything?
For
What
Cities
is that?
always want to maintain a public utility easement for any
Yeah.
modification, changes, improvement work, et cetera.
But nobody
Yeah,
else has
typically-
that on their property and
And it-
anywhere in the neighborhood.
It doesn't matter.
But there-
Standards are changing. They don't have it because they didn't do it.
I don't have that on my
right then.
property,
You have a public
Yet.
utility.
but just to the sidewalk.
so, Bill, you were gonna make some
What we're
comments,
talking about,
but,
this is a special case because you are based off of the whole vacation issue as it stands.
We debated this in a closed meeting 3 months ago. And okay, maybe 2 months ago, 2 to 3 months ago, and decided we were going forward with it. So in my mind, we made the decision then. And that decision was communicated to the residents who've now paid the fee. We made the deal. And I think
Didn't make the decision. I thought, I was
disagree with the
completely
timeline.
opposed to it.
It's a closed session to begin with. And secondly, I
well,
don't think
that's
there
why
was any decision.
That's why I
in a closed
was
session.
hesitating to bring it up, because it was a closed session.
This process had started prior to that meeting. In terms of the application, the applicant was already working on acquiring and doing the work to get the survey done, prior to even that closed session.
so,
Okay, it was my.
back to the amendment at hand. I'm interested, I don't know if I necessarily wanna call the question, because that's a vote to vote, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But-
There's a.
I don't know, I threw that out there because I don't know where everyone's at, so, I would prefer to vote on that and see if that splits the two, or where we end up, because I don't know.
So you have made a motion which separates out.
No, it deletes out.
It removes,
Separated.
it
removes
removes
it. Removes
pursuant,
it.
it removes the pursuant to Utah Code annotated paragraph in the quit claims for the three parties listed.
Okay, we ready for a vote? We'll start with Councilmember Meekum.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay, based off of the change.
Nay.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
So now we have the quit claims themselves. Do we
Okay, oh, now you wanted,
want a motion to approve the quit claims as amended?
okay, I got it. Do we have a second?
Second.
I'm keeping track of it, I think.
Second.
You guys are helping me, right? Okay, you've got a motion and a second.
The contingent upon, condition upon the legal description.
Contingent on the verification of the legal description
Review and approval of the legal description?
by our engineering.
Kevin, you need more than that.
Do you need more than the contingent on the?
Maybe let me just to clarify. So the easements close and the descriptions look pretty good, but they don't tie very well to a monument. So there might need to be a little bit more description in the description before we record the
Okay,
vacation.
so you would be comfortable with us approving these quit claims with the modifications potentially from additional survey or
Correct.
legal description?
Correct.
With the intent being that we're vacating to back of curb, right?
Back of sidewalk.
Back of sidewalk.
Okay, all right, any additional discussion?
I have a question. So it wasn't Lisa that asked for this variant, or this,
No, it's coming.
it was
Public
this
utility
Kevin.
easement was
Public,
requested by Kevin.
And this is the thing, I don't want you to think that I'm not in agreement with, I'm an engineer, I love engineering. I just wanted to be consistent, and if we're gonna do it for the whole town site, then we need to put it in the plan or put it in the ordinance, but it sounds like it triggers anyway. We get it if it redevelops. So I'm comfortable with it.
I'm just uncomfortable with, it
We
may
just
just
lost all
stay
our
the same and you
flexibility.
just lost all your flexibility.
There's no reason to give it up. I think he gave it up inappropriately.
The reason to give it up is to give it up and treat all of the residents of the city consistently, because we've consistently done it that way with the others that have been done in the past.
It's not necessarily totally consistent though, because,
This is not a standard
yeah,
vote to begin with. It wouldn't come to us if it was an issue that was
Yeah,
similar to
I-
everybody else.
Any
frankly-
vacation of property comes to us, any of them. There's an admin decision that vacates property, it has to come to the legislative body.
right, but I'm talking more about the easement portion.
I'm supportive of the general notion of what we're talking about. I'm just not
I
supportive of
I
giving
might
up
get on
public
board with that
utilities,
too, but I'm not okay with giving up the
especially when
easement.
staff has asked for it.
I think I don't think it's good.
I'm still not hearing that we gave up anything, because if they redevelop, it triggers. If they subdivide,
Okay.
it triggers.
Well,
Okay, so just let me-
if
Already passed.
Rocky Mountain comes in and decides to move those off of posts underground, we've given something up. But we've already been told that the cost of doing that is prohibitive, and they're not gonna do it, period.
Right. It's cheaper for them to tack it up every 10 years than to bore.
And so we're really
And
not
then you have
giving it enough.
communications lines, you have other lines. in
Right.
public utilities, not just-
But the cheapest way for all of them to do that is on those poles, as long as Rocky Mountain is maintaining them.
They don't put them on poles.
Telcom's underneath.
Telcom's underneath.
Now, Utopia has easements on those poles. They're not all strictly power, there's both. But there are definitely buried utilities, that's for sure.
Kevin, have we ever, that you know of, any of the properties been vacated, we ever put the easement on any of them in the historic area?
I'm trying to think of some examples of vacations, if maybe people can help me remember some
I
of
know
the areas
Calls
that
did
we
one up on
vacated.
First or Second East.
Okay, Call, that was probably in the mid-90s, maybe late 90s. I'd have to look back and see if an easement was required. So that's a tough one to answer, just because it's such an atypical, we haven't done many of these, so it's, usually the easement would be used not for, obviously all the utilities are existing, but if a utility was replaced, such as power, or communication, or
So the other
something that
thing, at
might
one
be
point in
bored, but-
time, like I said, we've discussed this for 2.5 years. Somebody said that the state has a ordinance where if a road is vacated, they can still put their utilities where it's vacated? That they don't lose their rights in a vacation to that? Do you know, is that, I should know the ordinance number, and I don't.
I wouldn't think so unless they retained an easement. But that's, might be a Lisa question. Corey plays a good attorney, but I don't play a very good attorney.
Do you know the answer to that, Corey?
Is this your attorney or planner hat? Please let us know.
So we deal with the two easements, the one we're talking about now. So let's just take the example of an easement that sits on your property, 7-foot side lot line, you want to build something there. There are two elements into that. On accessory buildings and stuff you put into that easement area, the easement holder has superiority over that. And so if you put a structure on that, they may ask you to remove it, or you'll be liable for that damage because they have a right to that easement. But there's also times where somebody wants to build over the easement. The zoning ordinance does allow you to build over an easement without vacating it. But you have to sign an agreement that there's still a superiority to that. So you have to go and tell it, all your utilities, and say, I plan to build here, do you have something here? They, nope, we don't have any infrastructure here. So they return back, they don't have any infrastructure there. Through agreement, the city attorney drafts that up and is recorded, you can now build on top of that easement, but there's still a superiority if and ever a utility did need that. It's still sitting there. even though you build over the top of it.
So what about this vacated road? What if the gas company wanted to go behind the sidewalk? Can they still do that?
You know, once they don't have the easement, they have to stay outside of that easement. They have to go then obtain that easement.
Here's an example of a situation that happened at my house. Across the street, they built a home way after the fact. And they came in and they needed to connect off of the line that was behind the sidewalk. It was over 10 feet. And so the only thing I asked, they couldn't do anything because they put their line in the wrong place. And I said, if you can do it without killing my tree, it's fine, but the contractor wouldn't guarantee it, and he went another way. But because it wasn't in that public utility easement,
They couldn't do it.
no rights.
Couldn't do it, yep.
Yeah.
The other superiority hits that if there's a historical easement that isn't caught on a plat or a recordation, that doesn't vacate the easement. That's why we Lisa spends a lot of time looking through the title, trying to say, where are the easements, what were they for? We have an easement for a gas line out there that's 100 feet wide through the entire middle section of the industrial complex, undefined, but they think it's 100 feet, but they don't know where the 100 feet sits on the ground. So it's interesting, and so those historical easements may come up and cause some superiority claims.
Okay. Did you make a motion?
I,
It was-
There's a motion on the table.
yeah,
Okay.
motion.
Are we ready to
second,
take a
amended,
vote?
So repeat the motion that's
yeah.
on the
Motion
table.
is to approve the quitclaim deeds for the Smiths, the Phillips, and the O'Malleys as amended, removing that paragraph.
With the item
With the-
regarding Kevin's
With the
approval.
subject to the final legal description as defined by the engineering department.
Okay,
Aye.
Aye.
Nay, for the same reason on the previous vote.
yeah, same.
I
Me.
thought we already voted, so.
Aye, no, that was
We
just
did,
to
we
amend
voted
it.
on removing
That was
the
removing
language.
the
Now we're
public
approving the
utility
quitclaims.
easement.
Okay.
So it's kind of chicken and the egg.
Okay, motion passes. Have we covered everything now?
Yes, on
You guys are
that,
done.
on that first agenda item, yes, we are.
Yeah.
Oh, we're not done.
Oh.
We're not done.
We're going to move on to item 2, which is a memorandum of understanding with Stokes Stevenson and West Bountiful City for development of the Trinity property. Corey?
Can I just say thank you for your careful, deliberate deliberation on this, thoughtful deliberation. And if it makes you feel any better, every utility indicated that they had no interest in that additional 8 feet.
They saw
I don't know if that helps, but again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Besides, there's nothing good on television anyway, so.
Right, and we came to this.
Seriously? All of
Really
Netflix and this was the
thrilling
best?
That's a lot of content.
It's a lot of content.
Thank you.
Well, Corey's making his way up. I do want to share that there's 2 representatives from Stokes Stevenson on the line. As
Okay.
There's no necessarily need to
They've been
have,
on there for an hour and a half?
they have. In fact, there's another representative,
happens.
Flock, just FYI,
The world of a
we need to move
developer.
Flock to number 3.
Okay,
You've done this.
that sounds great.
I've worn both hats.
I apologize to those who are waiting online. That was awful. Awful, and then it was a long way.
Yeah.
I do appreciate the discussion, so, okay, go ahead.
Ms. Robinson, could you pull up that zoning map again?
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Thank you. It just went black screen. I thought maybe it crashed.
So you don't do IT in addition to lawyer and planner?
Well, I tried to avoid it as much as possible because I can mess it up.
Apple, so yeah, he's
Oh, you
doing
switched
much
to
better.
Apple. You went over to the Java side, huh?
Yeah, it was a deal that my wife made with the phone company, so she put me on an Apple.
Good man, good man.
I saw Blue Bubble and like, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if we can get to, let's see where we're at. Trinity sites, green buildings, a little bit further, draw it up to the north, or up to the top of the screen. There we go. Trinity site, there's the property boundaries. Just below the light blue, you see kind of a dark shaded area with the old, so think of the green buildings out onto the west side, and that's a Trinity site. I think they're under a new name, Voltaire, something like that. I think of the book, but I'm not sure what the meaning behind the name is. But that's the site that we're talking about. As you can see, the darker area, the IVH zone, that's the main portion of the site inside of Centerville. If you look just to the left, you're going to see some West Bountiful industrial flex space buildings off of 1250 West. And then you see kind of the dirt road sitting in between those buildings and the dark light area. That's in West Bountiful. That's also part of the Trinity site, which is really the genesis of the MOU. The Stokes-Stevensons are in the process of acquiring the property. They can tell you, if they want to, the status of it. But the issue has come under the property split between two jurisdictions, West Bountiful and Centerville City. Creates a unique situation on what's on first and who's on third, and I don't know, is in second, or I think I got that all in the wrong order. So the issue of discussion is, what jurisdiction is going to look at the land development? Is it both of them? Are they consistent with each other? We know that we probably going to use utilities. We're not sure exactly how the utilities are going to align yet, but some of it's going to come from Centerville. A good portion appears to be. Some of it may be capacity West Bountiful. Then you have the whole issue that if you develop the whole site, you're crossing over jurisdictional boundaries. Should there be discussion about boundary changes between the city and so forth? And so there's a lot of that kind of ensued. And so the city administrators got together, talked with the various staff, with Stokes-Stevensons, and we came up with the idea of a memorandum of understanding. And so it's a non-binding agreement among all three parties, but it's trying to outline, hey, I'm going to West Bountiful, I'm going to Centerville, and I'm an interested party in developing this land. What can we tentatively agree to, even though it's non-binding? And if you'll read the document, it is really, when we met with West Bountiful, they're saying, look, we don't mind the development review process of Centerville City. We think you're as equal to us from our perspective. And we understand that there's a predominance sitting inside Centerville, but we still have some of our own city interests in here. And now it comes down to, if something gets developed, how does the taxes work? How does the addressing work? How does the police service work? And so memorandum of understanding, it says some of that's still yet to be identified, the specifics of where the water's coming from, where the drainage is going to hit. But we want to use Centerville as the pinpoint for the development review process. And West Bountiful is basically saying, in our understanding, we agree to that. And then we outline there's going to be potential need to have an interlocal agreement between, and what is that fair share between the two communities as the property develops and where the buildings get placed.
Just before you keep on going, Cory, where am I seeing any crossover on our property boundaries? Is it just that thin line on the west side?
It's tucked in. I'll just get the pointer rather than
I'm trying to see where the development overlaps between jurisdictions.
And while he's pointing out, I do want to just clarify that this potential development does not remove the green steel building. That remains. So it does not impact that property. This is the vacant property surrounding that property.
So what you'll really see is that this portion of the property, sitting like this, all of that area is sitting inside West Bountiful and is part of the Trinity site.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm saying, the grayed area is not the...
Yeah, the darker gray is our shadowing of our zoning for IVH zoning.
And thanks to Councilmember McEwen referencing this.
So, you're a little over a quarter, maybe not quite a third. And so basically it was kind of hashed out to say, look, Centerville's kind of taking the lead through the development review process. And there's some commitment that there's going to be, some discussion of how the building permits work with West Bountiful at some point in time with an interlocal agreement. It recognizes that there may be some discussion later of how we're going to fair share any tax generation out of the property. Also, a future discussion in an interlocal agreement of whether we do any boundary changes that may be necessitated when we find it out. But
So did staff talk about annexation? That's where I'm at.
So, Yes, there was discussion about, again, incorporating into Centerville or vice versa. The challenge here is the potential loss of revenue to West Bountiful, right?
Correct,
So if there was going to be any shifting of boundaries,
They
they'll
would
want to
want-
be an equal
Yeah.
share return to them if a swap somewhere else. So there are some ideas on the table. Again, I don't necessarily want to get into that discussion now because it's all preliminary of if they're, where the buildings are situated, maybe we can shift the boundary lines to make sure it's not going halfway through a building or whatnot. So there are some opportunities to potentially shift the boundaries,
And I can see both sides.
but the loss of revenue, of
Yeah.
course, West Bountiful is not interested in giving up that
Correct.
opportunity.
So it really just puts Centerville kind of in the lead to get into the development review process, following our design and our use standards and our zoning standards for the holistic developing of the property. And then once they reach that point where they can now begin the process of actually saying, okay, we want to move forward with construction, we need to come back to do a discussion with the two cities, discuss those between the two cities, and enter into an interlocal agreement between the two cities to hash out the final details of the project. And it just gave the developer some kind of common sense comfort to say, does your ordinance on the development review take over Centerville's ordinance of development review? And West Bountiful said, we're comfortable with your development review process. So once you're at a point where you're going to approve this project, now come back to us and we'll hash out the final details. We'll know where we're pulling the water from, we'll know where we're pulling the drainage from, and there is a substantial amount likely coming from Centerville from our perspective, but there's still opportunities for West Bountiful to participate in some of that service infrastructure, and so we'll hash out those final details and then enter into the interlocal agreement. So that's really what it's just a comfort level. It's non-binding between the parties. It's just everybody, in my discussion with West Bountiful is they were just like, hey, West Centerville's good with it, we're good with it. And I said, well, yeah, I've participated in planning processes with West Bountiful.
Played that game before.
I'm not playing that one.
How much extra administrative overhead is this adding for the cities to manage and to deliberate and to?
Again, that'd be part of the conversation with the interlocal agreement, and
That would probably just be a plan review.
Yeah,
fee
so-
that we
But
would.
we'll
we'll take
recoup,
100% we'll take 100% of the revenues if we're doing all the work, right? That's part of that
Well, that's,
interlocal agreement.
see, I don't mind having an odd thing as long as it doesn't create an administrative burden that we're actually underwater because we're participating in this weird hybrid. To
Yeah,
me, that's what I don't understand.
yeah, I don't think so from the initial development process because West Bountiful's agreed that the fees and the engineering to get through the vesting process will be with Centerville. So we'll recoup our normal development fees for the entire project. What will get tricky is now when we get down to the surface infrastructure,
The water,
the water,
drainage.
additional storm drain upsizing and where's it going and who's paying the difference, that's gonna be.
So let me just play out a scenario. Our permitting process, our building inspector, building falls down on the West Bountiful side because whatever. Are we liable? West Bountiful?
That's part of the detailed discussion, because we had that discussion here with the police service. If a building's cut, and I'm being a little facetious, if a building's cut in half and a worker gets injured on the West Bountiful half, can we go call someone? Yeah, that's the tricky details of the interlocal agreement.
And that's where I'm signaling that I would prefer at the end of this process, before we get to that it's annexed one way or another, just so it's clean.
That's a scenario could take place.
And
I don't
that
see-
happens
I don't
at
see
our
West
level, by the way.
Bountiful letting us annex and us, say, taking the same position.
And this is a conversation, our council to their council. The developer is not necessarily in the argument saying, I petition you to do this. We actually petitioned the council to annex.
I think that's solved by totally.
Okay.
And I do want to let you know that West Bountiful did approve this at their last meeting in December. So this is this
memo,
MOU.
okay.
But it just puts us in the lead point for now.
And we really need to just stick to this at this point. This is all
That's
that's
it.
before us.
We-
We're not discussing annexing or anything else. We're,
There's no
Right.
application officially at this point. This is
Right.
just trying to pave the way to help the applicant be successful.
Okay.
So we're agreeing in principle that we're going to agree on something that'll.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yes,
Yes.
okay, thank you, Corey. Does our applicant want to say anything?
Sam, Brian, if you'd like to say anything,
Okay, so it's Sam Nelson
and Brian Stevenson.
and Brian Stevenson.
Yeah, on our end, yeah, we don't have anything tonight as far as the MOU goes. We also have Sean Farron, who's our legal counsel on, if he has any other additional questions. But yeah, we did meet with West Bountiful a couple weeks ago, and they, like you said, they did approve on their end.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, and this is Brian. Thanks, Sam, and thank you for the introduction to the project. I think we wanted to talk about this MOU, but then also get this in front of you and let you know that we're excited to be developing this project in the city, and we look forward to working with Centerville. There are some issues that we're going to have to work through just because of the nature of how the lot lines line up, and we're planning on building 3 buildings on the site plan, and just where those buildings sit and how the parcels are divided ultimately will be things that we'll discuss at a later time. But this is, like Corey has articulated, this is our first attempt at saying, here's the project, here's a few of the issues, and let's start off, on a good foot together with an MOU that we understand there's some issues, and let's agree that we will agree at some point that we can, as smoothly as we can, push this project through to be successful through the city of Centerville, along with the cooperation with West Bountiful. So we appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
And as well, just want to echo that Brant and Corey and Lisa have also spent a lot of time with us figuring this out, hashing this out, so appreciate their time as well.
Thank you so much, Sam and Brian. Any other discussion?
I would motion that we authorize the city manager to execute the non-binding memorandum of understanding for Stokes Stevenson.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, Bill seconded.
Before further debate, I just want to make a comment, just generally to the council, just goes to our recurring theme that we still haven't revisited our master plan, and things get developed, whether this is the right development for the city or not, that's a policy discussion, but in my mind, this is the perfect location for our TOD, for our future front runner stop that we talked about in our work session, and this development effectively kills any future multifamily development there in a TOD, and we just don't have any control over that. I'm not.
You have other issues besides
Well, I know.
family with the potential brownfield contamination.
Potential brownfield, we know it's a.
Well, I'm just being.
We know it's going to be a circular site, but in any event, it just,
I think
we're allowing an old, outdated master plan.
we're being blown in the wind.
Yeah. And again, I don't have anything against the
Oh, that makes
developers
total sense.
themselves. I
Yeah.
don't.
It begs the question, where are we on starting the plan?
So
Nowhere.
in my city manager report, I do want to talk about the west side strategic plan. I'll talk about that in my city manager
Okay.
report.
Thank you.
But
Any other-
echoing your call on that, the only reason I'm even suggesting this is okay is it's non-binding. It's just an understanding to understand.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, the problem is if something binding comes to the table, and we haven't done anything about the other question,
This isn't approving anything, this is just saying that we're gonna work with them in West Bountiful.
Yeah.
That property's already zoned for this, we couldn't
Right.
stop it, no matter what.
this council knows I'm not anti-development. My
Right.
goodness, that's my line of work. I
Right.
just,
I
city perspective.
totally agree with
From a
you.
city perspective, I just want to make sure that we've sat down with our planner, and we've sat down as a council and as a staff and said, what do we want to have on in our city generally, let alone
Right.
our west side? What do
Right.
we want this to look like? Again, my point earlier this evening, what do we want this place to look like 10, 25, 50 years down the road, as best as we can map it out?
Right.
Yeah.
I'll second your motion. All right, actually, no.
Bill
No,
seconded
Bill
already,
already seconded it. Go ahead, take a vote. I was doing an anecdotal side note, and
Any
good side note.
Fran's rolling his eyes.
Brand's like my manager report's getting longer.
Yeah.
No, that was already part of it, so it's good.
Shall we take a vote? Any other discussion?
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes.
I'm going to the exciting one.
We are actually going to move to item number 4, Flock Software Services Agreement. We've got Lieutenant Ackerson here.
Waited patiently all night long.
Yes, and I think somebody from Flock is online, so that's why we're gonna,
There was nothing good on TV anyway,
so we can let these poor people go do something else.
All right, hey, thank you very much. And yeah, I've been educated tonight on a lot. But with flock safety, we've talked in the past about flock safety. It was just in November of 2021, we signed a memo of understanding, an MOU with them, allowing us to access their data. And so just to kind of give you an idea of what flock safety is, I'm trying to think if you, councilmen were around when we did that before.
It may have sat in a meeting
Okay.
in anticipation.
Okay, well, I have Craig Gardner. He's with Flock Safety. He's there he is, and he's here to kind of present a little information on Flock and help us answer questions and work our way through our presentation today.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, I've always wanted to be on TV, so here I am. It's a dream come true, you know? I'm going to share.
Want me to video you so I can send it to you?
I know. Well, send it to my parents and tell them they finally made it, you know? Well, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick slideshow here. I'm going to take a pretty limited amount of time, but I certainly do appreciate you guys taking the time to learn more about Flock. I'm really excited to work with Lieutenant Ackerson and Chief Child, and really excited to be in Centerville. I've visited several times. I've been to the police department. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there tonight in person, but I am in Utah quite a bit. I just got back from my parents down in Salem, so I really appreciate the snow. I'm from Arizona, and we don't get that white stuff in the air down here, you know? Anyway, so Flock Safety, we are a company that makes equipment that helps detect and deter crime. The purpose of the conversation tonight, and just getting to the meat and potatoes, is that crime is on the rise everywhere in the U.S. It's something we see a lot of. Not as many officers as we need, not necessarily as much equipment as we need, but crime tends to keep going up and up and up, unfortunately. And so one of the many things that we do as a company is we look for ways to eliminate crime. And one of the main ways that we do that is with our ALPR technology. That's a license plate reader. So our mission is to eliminate crime, but specifically with those license plate readers, I think what's most pertinent to know about them and the way that they work is that there's really 3 benefits that they provide the department. The first is proactive benefit. So being able to, get alerts when things like stolen vehicles, amber alerts, silver alerts, all sorts of stolen plates, all sorts of things that come into the city. Those are things that these help detect as they come into the city. Most crime is done with vehicles, and we're able to detect when there's potentially nefarious folks around or there's a dangerous situation and get the police department ahead of that. The second way that Flock is used is investigative. We do what we call a vehicle fingerprint. So a vehicle comes by, it takes objective information from that vehicle, like the plate, the color, the make and model, so that when you have those Ring camera videos and those surveillance camera videos where we can't quite identify the vehicle and it's one out of many, we can actually narrow it down and find the suspect vehicle for your police department in the investigation. And I have some examples of how you guys have done that already in Centerville and some of the benefits that you've already received from these cameras. Even though you don't have any in Centerville, you don't have any right next door to you either. I think the next closest cameras are in North Salt Lake and maybe Ogden or Roy. But there's already been some significant help there. So what I also want to talk to you about is how the cameras work. Just on a very high level, a vehicle comes by and these take a few photos of that vehicle. And it recognizes a license plate, the type of vehicle. And what you'll notice here is it's indiscriminate evidence. So it's not going to be faces, personally identifiable information. There's no traffic enforcement ever, any component of that. This is really meant for, more serious crimes. So that's exactly what the department would see. In fact, in order to see this as an officer, I would have to put in a search reason and actually put in why I'm searching something, a case number, tied it back to the case, and then I'd be able to continue my investigation. As much as I like to talk to the police department about kind of what everything is and how great this can be useful and how well it can serve the police department, I'd really like to talk to you guys about what it isn't. So we already mentioned there's no personal identifiable information, there's no pictures of faces, these are pointed to the rear of vehicles, it's not used for traffic enforcement, and we tend to be very cautious of privacy, and so the data automatically deletes on a rolling basis after 30 days. There's no way to retrieve that data. So it's only used either in things that are happening right now or just happened in the city to help us investigate crime or proactively prevent crime. A couple other pieces about the system. It's very secure. We are in the AWS GovCloud. It isn't used for, again, traffic enforcement or personally identifiable information. One thing on this slide that I really like is a transparency portal. Talking through that a little bit, that's a portal that each one of our customers and anyone piloting the software can do is put this on the website to show exactly how the information is being used and exactly how the police department is benefiting from it. That being said, I have a couple stories I'll tell you guys directly out of your city. These were a handful of the stories that have been solved using Flock. There's more details than this in these stories, but I'll give you the high level and I'll allow Lieutenant Ackerson to correct me if I get anything wrong. But the way that this was used through an MOU is essentially the police department is accessing a free shared network of these cameras in other cities around you. One was kind of a cool story involving $10,000 worth of stolen tools. The detective was actually able to track down Escalade. There was a hit and run by the In-N-Out where they were able to identify the Ford pickup. One that I thought was a really neat solve, I'm super glad we were there for, was the aggravated assault. There was an SUV with a trailer, a lady who was assaulted, and they were able to identify suspects. There's a stolen vehicle, there's credit card fraud and theft, those types of things happening. And so each one of these examples is something that is a real crime that happened recently in Centerville that they used Flock to identify suspects that led to progressing the case and in most cases arrests. There's a little bit of data out of other customers in the area. So this is the most recent stats I have from our friends over in Ogden PD and how they use some of our cameras as well. They use them again in investigations as well as with what we call hot tags or to get alerts when potentially dangerous or endangered people are coming into the community, so it gives the police department a heads up. Couple of those stories, this top vehicle that you see here was actually a vehicle that was stolen with a baby inside of it that turned into a kidnapping. It was unfortunate, but Flock was used to recover the child very, very quickly. The other one was a homicide case. And then we use this not only just in Utah, but also all over the country. And I can give you guys countless examples. This is one of my favorites where they had a child who was taken by a stranger at gunpoint. They were able to use our vehicle fingerprint to find them in a different area of Atlanta. So there was one side they had left. It's a long story. There's some news coverage on it. It was really neat. But we've used Flock to identify vehicles and help the police department solve crime. All the way across the country and in many, many cities near you, and that's why the police department's been able to be successful. So the ask tonight is, we've talked to the police department about trying this technology out in the city, and as a company, we're willing to put our money where our mouth is. We want to be able to do a pilot to be able to show the successes and with the continued success, hopefully be able to justify funding and spending on the program. So that being said, are there any questions?
So let me add a little more. So this demo is 30 days. We're probably about 3 months out from being able to get the cameras installed. Right now, we have identified 11 locations in our city that we'd like to place a camera, with the understanding that we would probably whittle it down to maybe 5 cameras ultimately. And so after the 30 days, we would analyze our data, figure out which cameras are producing the most information, and then make a determination whether we're getting a good return on our investment on the proposed amount. And then we identify which locations to keep those cameras out. And Flock would then come in and remove the cameras we don't want. And at that point, we would then be on the hook for the negotiated amount. And Flock had their systems, their pricing is pretty basic. It's $2,500 a year per camera. There's a $350 install fee for each camera. And then
If you go to 5, what did you say? You may end up with 5 when it's all said and done.
Potentially. Right.
Would you say $2,500?
Yes.
For each one?
And so, and then there's another, like a search engine that we're going to demo as well, an advanced search. It's $2,500 a year. So we're looking at between $15,000 to $17,500 a year if we stay with the 5 cameras.
Does that offset any existing technology we're using? Like, would we drop any service we're using now, or would this be all new ad for an upcoming budget season?
So this would be for the fiscal year 24 budget. If the cameras got installed in, say, April-ish, we would run our 30-day pilot. And if we decide we want to keep going with it, then we would revisit as a council and make that decision. And then Flock would then allow us to keep the cameras up and going and then not be on the hook until the fiscal year 24 budget's figured out. And then after July, then we can make the payment for
But it would be
next
all
year.
new expenditure
Yes.
for next year? Okay.
Yes.
What's the warranty or replacement? So let's say the camera suffers vandalism.
So they're Flock's cameras, not ours, and so they maintain them. If they're stolen, damaged, malfunction, Flock comes out and replaces them for no fee. But yeah, this is it's exciting technology. Just we presented those 5 cases briefly that we've used Flock to help solve, and they're not even our cameras.
So you're just getting data
We are.
that you then use.
Right, and a lot of this data, the way we solved on these cases were with the fingerprint technology. So not even going off the license plate, it's, so like on one of them, Detective Cash had, I believe it was the tools that were stolen, and they were pawned at 2 different pawn shops up north, okay? So one in Roy and one in, I think, South Ogden. And so if you can take, okay, I want, because he knows what time the tools are pawned at each place. So he asked Flock, well, give me all the vehicles that were common between the 2 different locations, right around that same time. And you have your suspect.
So this estimate, this contract amount of $33,850, it's higher because you're only going to do 5 cameras, not 11.
Right.
Do you feel like the 5 is sufficient?
I don't know.
You'll see.
Right, we'll see. That's kind of what, based on, I would really like to kind of lock down the Parish Lane area. That's where a lot of our traffic is coming in and off the freeway. And I think we can do it relatively well for about 5 cameras. But yeah, we'll see what the data says. And we have them strategically placed. We have some on the south end of the city and some right there near Parish and a few on the west side.
Okay.
And we've had historical burglaries in the storage areas and places like that. So that's the best part about this. We can discuss those in the actual placement in a closed session. But I think giving them the option to go up to 11 is totally appropriate because we don't really know. And honestly, the technology does replace a lot of the legwork pretty quickly to find some of these things out.
Does the technology replace enough that we we could offer kind of a subsidiary rental agreement to some of the storage facility owners. In other words, they wouldn't need to put cameras in because they pay us to have a flock camera in their area.
I don't know how that would work. I know right now we would, the issue of private companies generating license plate data, right now as a government, we can't use that data.
And we can only use the data if we have cause, essentially is what it boils down to, right? So it's not like you're not using it as a private.
No, I understand.
But what Bill's saying
But
is.
they don't use it
monitoring.
privately either. All they do is turn it over to the police once they've had an incident.
I think it's a creative idea to ask if they wanted extra canopy to have them put it in there and participate in the network. From my perspective, if it's
We get a referral.
if it's maintained under the same evidentiary standard and it's flock putting it in, I don't see that's a problem. But I don't know that we
I think
negotiate.
it's gonna have to go through our police department, but if we could do the 5, and if you want one in a certain area, you can donate $2,500 a year to the city, and we'll put a flock camera
Yeah, that's what I'm
outside,
saying.
and that's what I think Bill's trying to say.
I think it's
Not anything to do, they can't call, they can't get the
They don't
information.
track it.
But our
It still
police
goes through
department would, if they want to donate $2,500, we'll put a flock camera.
I think it's interesting, and I think it's a great idea. One of the things that we have to be careful about is that there is, when you look at the surveillance, and we'll call it what it is in the height, the surveillance state, you have to be very careful about how you position these and how you use them. And I've sat down with the police department and I've seen their demonstration. I'm satisfied that they're meeting the legal requirements necessary to keep this data safe and to not be a surveilled state. But you are going to encounter residents who are going to feel like, oh, you guys are watching me all the time. So with the introduction of this technology, from a communication strategy standpoint, we have to be very careful about highlighting what it does and what it doesn't do. And when we get some of these, I would say, higher profile wins from the system, that those are mentioned in the community so that it's both a justification and an assurance that this is a good spend.
It was a different one, but it's the same kind of technology. On one of our police cars, we have you could describe it better than I can, but a little beeper if it comes within so close to a stolen vehicle. And the officer was coming to work, got into Centerville, and it started to beep, and I guess it's kind of hide and go seek. The closer you go, the louder it beeps. And they found the truck parked across the street from my house. I mean, they called me and they're like, Robin, what's this truck? And I'm like, it's been there 2 or 3 days. My neighbor lady had passed away. I just assumed it was somebody at her house. I was able to get on my Ring doorbell and see a car go past and then pull over. Then this truck pulled up. 2 people got out and got into the car in front, and they'd left the truck there. But how long would it have sat there? It was stolen out of Bountiful. But it was our technology, it was our little beeper that found this truck that was taken. So it was kind of cool.
Councilman Meekum, on that case, like with your Ring camera, you're able to probably see a make and model of car, a basic description. And so if we had the cameras in place, the flock cameras, we could enter that information and do a search for, within a half hour of that time frame, and we could potentially identify and get a license plate number on the car that
They
dropped
brought
off
into.
the vehicle.
Yeah, because there was no way they couldn't find him.
So just to expand a little bit, because I saw the whole demo. What's the legal protection for when you do a search? How is that registered? What information as the officer do you need to provide? Because I think it's very important that you understand, this isn't just an officer goes, I wonder where Robin is, let me go see where her red car is.
They already know.
They already know that, but there are, I think it's important to note that there are some pretty significant barriers you have to get through to use this data, and that's important.
So yeah, you would have to enter a search reason, and we've determined that search reason for us is a case number. So it's gone beyond just a basic query, but there's actual report written documenting the search. And so it's kind of like the similar requirements to run CJIS data, so running a criminal history on someone or running vehicle information. So the officer can't just start randomly looking at photos. You have to list a reason, and that reason is listed on an audit log on who ran which query when and for what reason. And part of this audit log can be made public. So we could have a link, if I'm correct, Craig, we could have a link on our website to where we could see the audit logs, kind of a slimmed down version without the personal identifying information on what searches we're running as a police department, how often and for what. So it's very transparent. Flock is I think a little overly protective on some information at times. They only maintain for 30 days on their data. That's their decision as a company. State law allows 9 months of retention. And so
But if you attach it to a case, it becomes evidence that we keep.
Right. Yeah. If you do that search within the first 30 days, and then you can save it. Yes.
Is there a reason why you chose 30 days?
It's their program.
From a Flock standpoint, across the nation, we want to be really, really cognizant of public privacy. It's something where actually we started as we started working with HOAs initially. Then we started working with police departments a couple years after we were established as a company. And what stuck with us is that we really wanted to find a way to eliminate crime that was happening right now. And when we look at the data, it doesn't support the need to keep data for longer than 30 days. We're seeing a massive amount of success that happens pretty much immediately when cases are solved quickly after the crime happens. The odds of needing to go back is very, very rare. And so we thought 30 days was a great balance. We have an ethics board and committee that agrees with us that says, hey, 30 days is the right balance. Plus it helps us along the lines of all sorts of laws across many cities and many, many states, some leaning one way or the other politically, helps us quite a bit to say, look, we're using this data in a very responsible way. It's the police department's data, and it's used to help the immediate community at the immediate time, and no more than that. There's some other entities that don't take quite that stance, and we didn't think it was right, so we didn't do it.
Okay, thank you.
How many images are you capturing across your network a day?
I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can put a number on
something
it.
authoritatively, we'll believe you, but it's a big number, right?
Well, yeah, I've seen weekly. I've seen billion. Like there's a lot across the nation, but we have thousands of customers.
And that's why they don't store it for more than 30 days, because 1 billion times 30 is pretty expensive.
They need a lot of storage.
They need a lot of storage. So, sorry to crack it down to you are a commercial enterprise. There is a legitimate reason why you don't store it beyond the ethical reason. That's the marketing spin.
That's fair.
So there's a theme that you might have been noticing, and that is recruitment of employees is increasingly challenging. Employees are getting increasingly more expensive. So really what we're trying to find is how to be more efficient with technology. And you're starting to see that a number of items have come before you to help us be more efficient to eliminate the potential need of hiring a person or whatever that case might be. And this is going to be another one of those tools that would help the police department be more effective and more efficient with their time.
So Paul has said that this means he doesn't need an officer next year.
I don't think he would actually agree with you, but that's my position. We're going to have a cage match, I think, in the next year.
Just trying to add some level.
He's probably going to say he needs a detective to chase down all these leads.
I feel like when I went out with Chief Childs, I could not believe how busy our police officers were, and he told me that wasn't this. He told me it was going to be a calm night, and I don't think it was a particularly really busy night, but it's amazing how much goes into what they're doing, and so I think if there's anything that helps them to solve crimes faster, that's going to be a benefit.
Mayor Pro Tem, may I make a motion?
Sure.
I'd make a motion that we recommend approval of the Flock Safety Camera Pilot Program.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
So are we approving that for the pilot amount listed?
Yeah, so what I'd like to, if it's okay, I mean.
Suggest a friendly amendment?
Right.
If I could, so I mean, this is really, we're just proposing a pilot. So the question would be, as a council, would you like this to come before you? So again, so it's going to be installed, I think we're talking about April, right? Is that kind of the time frame we were looking at? So we're going to start our budget discussions. And so really what we're going to do is we're going through our budget is have this kind of wrapped into the budget.
Yeah.
That's why I think the timing's great. But I'd like to probably bring it back and have kind of a report for the full, again, the
For the
approval
full
of the
approval.
entire.
Is it-
You have to approve the agreement as is, but I just, as a recommendation to come back before you when the pilot program is.
Yeah.
I think that's helpful.
Okay.
That way you probably have a contract. in
Is that
there,
okay?
too.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Great to meet you.
Craig.
See ya.
I like Gina, she points, so I don't have to figure if I'm at the right or the
Oh,
left.
I'm sorry.
I like that.
I should have probably vocalized
I
that.
like
That's
that.
good, because sometimes Clark will be like, he'll just randomly pick, and like,
Yeah, you
you're
gotta
talking
be on-
left
you
to
gotta be
right
ready.
from which person?
Gotta be ready.
That's what I say, at least she points at me and I'm up.
Shouldn't point, but anyway, okay, back to item 3. Would we be okay to take a quick 2 or 3 minute break? Is that okay?
You're the boss.
Yeah, you're the boss, whatever you
Okay,
need.
I'm calling it. I'll be right back. Okay. Have we got, oh, yeah, we've got everyone back. Are you ready to go, Jennifer? Okay. We will move to item number 3, the real estate purchase contract and funding for the David Nash Revocable Trust property located at 100 North Fire Break Road. I'll turn the time over to Brant.
Thank you, Councilmember Hurst. So this is the opportunity to ratify the approval of the real estate purchase contract to fund the 32.82 acres along the hillside owned by the David Nash Revocable Trust. I appreciate Councilmember Summerhays, Lisa, and all their diligent efforts to bring this and do all the work. But this is a great opportunity to purchase this property, $205,000. So this is brought to you, all the negotiations have been completed. We are under contract. We just need the money to finalize it. So they asked for us to delay this till the beginning of the year, of course, for tax reasons and things like that. So we obliged and we waited till today to bring it forward to you today. But it's a done deal and pretty excited about this. I do want to share that this is not necessarily a clean title. There are easements and encumbrances on this property, similar to any other hillside, whether it's federal easements and things like that. But based on the cost that we are purchasing, it's still a heck of a deal. So just want to make sure you're aware that there are some encumbrances on this property, but nothing that scares us away as staff. So we recommend approval of this real estate purchase contract.
Any other questions, discussion?
Well, I think you understated how, no, this is, I congratulate everyone who was involved in this. This is definitely consistent with the goals for hillside preservation and adding to that a large chunk of property. I'm just thrilled that this is taking place. So thank you for your efforts. And to all those on the Trails Committee who helped identify and participate in this. This is small government working the way it's supposed to for the benefit of its residents. And this is one of the few times you actually get to see that come to fruition in a quick period of time. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Spencer.
Yeah, you're welcome. Glad to be able to use my
Yeah.
private life, professional, day-to-day skills for the benefit of the community.
And this is a very, honestly, generous, reduction from the David Nash Revocable Trust, the David Nash, and I think in the future would like to do something to recognize that. And
Right?
I think that would be very appropriate.
As such, I'll make a recommendation that we ratify approval of the real estate purchase contract and approve funding for the purchase of approximately 32.82 acres located approximately at 1,000 North Fire Break Road from the David Nash Revocable Bull Trust.
Second. Okay, any other discussion? I think we're ready to vote, so.
Aye.
Councilmember Meekum?
Aye.
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 Thank you, motion passes. And again, thank you, Councilman Summerhays, for all of your efforts on that. That will be a wonderful asset to our city and continue to maintain trail access, so.
As George said, it was not just me.
Well, I was
We
gonna
got
say-
great community members.
I was going
Great
to
community
ask,
members.
and I'm looking at the man who tweets back there in the back.
Let's not tweet anything until after closing.
When this is all closed and this is done, I would like to see in the next newsletter kind of a biopic that explains how this came to be, who was involved, and what we did to get to where we are. Because I think it's important, because the community members that were involved, who joined the Trails Committee, they were told, you will have a voice, and you'll have a pretty large voice if you participate in local government, and they did. So I want them recognized, and I want to make sure that other community members know that participation on committees and local government does lead to outcomes. I think it's important, because we don't talk about that enough.
No, we don't.
That's a really good point. Thank you very much. Okay, moving to minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes as recorded.
Okay,
Second.
second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. On the financial report, we don't have a presentation tonight, is that correct, Brent? Okay. So we'll move forward to the council report. We'll turn the time over to Councilman Summerhays, and then I'm gonna take 1 30-second. I need to tell you one thing.
We just got a little bit of update on where we're at with the the Nash property as it relates to trails. I think this will be a great thing, again, as it relates to how we utilize our hillside, and we really need to work on finalizing a trails master plan. And this will be a great impetus for that and incorporate that into the general plan. Corey, who may hopefully be able to help us make sure that that gets incorporated finally. Big news last month. It's not the news necessarily that I definitely wanted to hear. I got a call early December. We were set to approve as a rec center board a levy increase. If you remember, the rec district has never had a levy increase in 15 years. So they've just kicked the can down the road with good intentions, of course, by reducing any fees to taxpayers, but now they're in the awful position of
Need to get money from anywhere.
anywhere. Yeah, I mean, our cash balances just have been plummeting. COVID killed us. Special improvements districts didn't have access to ARPA or CARES funds. They got a little bit from the cities, but obviously not nearly what was lost. There was large capital improvement projects that costed a lot of money that were planned, but they also caused additional shutdowns to the pools, thus making the cash position even worse. So we were set to approve a levy increase, and then about a week into December, I got a call from our executive director and one of our finance advisors that the date had been missed because we're on a fiscal January 1 to December 31 calendar to meet the truth and taxation hearings so that we could collect money timely, which made our December 12th meeting all the more uncomfortable because now we have a huge budget shortfall. How do we fund that? And essentially what we did is we pushed off a lot of capital projects to float us until we can get to a truth and taxation hearing as soon as possible. And the one way to do that is to change the fiscal calendar year to match and be in line with all of our local municipalities, which I frankly think that makes a lot of sense. It ties into our city-wide budget processes throughout, North Salt Lake, Bountiful, West Bountiful, and Woods Cross. And it gets us maybe 6 months sooner than maybe the year, but we're talking about, we still don't collect money until late next year. But that's a work in progress now. So the levy increase is going to be about almost a double. It'll be almost 100%. I think right now it's about $14 a year. So it'll go on the average house. So it'll go about to 28. So hopefully that'll get things in line as well. So tough decisions. It's been a long, tough process that's still ongoing at the rest district,
But it won't be effective till next year.
It wouldn't be effective unless that truth and taxation hearing occurred, but yes, it would be effective as of the assessments for November 2020.
2023.
Correct this year.
Do they still
I guess that
intend,
isn't next year.
yeah, do they still intend to try for a bond?
Well, that's the question, right? So the motion that I passed has been front and center for the board moving forward, and that has always been, hey, we want to be transparent with the public. They need to know what that levy increase is prior to making a voting decision on the bond. So that's a little bit in flux, to be honest. So there's some committees right now on how to handle things. Luckily, if you head into a recession, construction costs potentially come down, and maybe the Fed stops hiking rates mid this year and things kind of settle out. Maybe it's a bad coincidence that turns to the favor of the district long term. But I think the goal is still the same. Overall, the rec center is extremely utilized. It's fully functional. It's very, very busy. Still high on the priority list is to make sure that the school district pays their fair share for all the swim team use that goes on, particularly when you have Farmington High using it, who's not a member of the district. It's a point of sore point. The school district will always contend, well, you use our gymnasiums, et cetera, but the ongoing maintenance cost, in my mind, isn't commensurate with that. So, those are things that are on the docket.
It actually sounds like a double taxation situation for the residents. They're paying for the education side and that, and then they're not, it should flow through. I think they should be paying.
So, that's where we're at.
Okay, that everything?
Yep.
All right, I just want to mention the South Davis Sewer Board. They had a member who, just before I was appointed, passed away. It's the at-large position, so the board is in the position right now of appointing someone to that position. I'm making mention of this. If you know of anyone who would like to apply for that, applications are due January 6th.
And how much time they have on their term remaining?
I think it's 2 years, but I'm new at that job, so don't quote me on that. So, I can find that out. Anyway, so if you know of anyone,
What city was that at-large member of?
it's a voted in. So they have an appointed member from all of the cities, and then they have 2 at-large
That are voted?
that run in an election. So anyway, applications are due the 6th, and they'll be doing and conducting interviews on January 12th. I think they make a decision in their meeting, which is the 19th, I think, of January. They have to do this within 90 days of when he passed. So anyway, if you know of anyone who's interested in that, I'm happy to get you the information, or it's on their website if you just want to go there. That's all I have. Brant?
My turn. Great, thank you so much. Just have a few items. The first one, piggyback off the general plan / economic development plan. So, been working with a couple of groups trying to identify or complete a market analysis for our west side. One of the questions we have is we have some developers, JF Capital is one, others of wanting to evaluate, what to do with their properties over there. Right now, we have commercial is heavily encouraged according to our plan, but if you speak to the state, and I spoke to Ben Hart, who's former deputy director of Go Ed on it, and he had stated there's a vacancy of 23% in commercial and 3% industrial, and definitely a demand for more residential, particularly multifamily. So anyway, I engaged Zions Public Finance as well as Lewis Young to provide a proposal of what it would cost to do a market analysis. Again, just looking at what is the best uses over there, which then would jump into the general plan or potentially zoning of what we'd be looking for on that west side development. We're talking about the entire west side, even existing development over there, just evaluating what we're doing on that west side. So really what we're trying to do, Councilor Summerhays, to your point, is getting something in place now over there as development's occurring, that we're not losing out on an opportunity. And there's another conversation about the TOD that you had mentioned that Corey and I probably want to have an offline conversation. You weren't on council at the time regarding that discussion, or we could schedule a work session. I don't know, whatever we want to do with that, if the rest of council wants to have that discussion again. We went through that process once, and it did not go well. So we can update you on that process as a council if we want to do that. Yeah. But anyway, so right now, just again,
It might affect some interlocal agreements?
potentially. So really with the general plan and economic development strategic plan, those were going hand in hand, so we're just doing it methodically and taking step by step. So market analysis is the first step that we're looking at conducting in the next month or so. So I have 2 proposals back, and that I'll be evaluating those proposals with Jacob and then hiring one to do that market analysis. Also a leakage analysis. Just trying to understand where is our tax, our residents, where are they spending their money? Are we missing an opportunity by promoting a certain business or industry here a lot more? That will be really helpful in terms of what kind of retail we pursue if we're missing out on some restaurants. I know that's been a big thing. How much are we actually losing out on? So anyway, That's item one. Next item I have is Bryce has coordinated the February 7th meeting for Bob, our guy down at Parks and Rec, to do some headshots and group pictures. So would we be okay with February 7th having headshots and group pictures done that day? So dress pretty?
As long as they offer great photoshopping services.
Oh, for yours? We will definitely have fun.
No
You can add years, whatever.
No required dress code? There will be what?
required dress code.
There'll be a recommended dress code that hopefully won't require you to go spend money. If not, we can we provide one of those yeah.
Graduation.
The Dickie Drake.
Solid color white, or solid color.
You gotta come up here if you're gonna talk, Bryce.
What is it, Bryce?
Solid color shirt,
A solid color.
button down or polo.
Okay.
So February 7th for that.
I want to see you in your blouse.
And one other thought, I just, again, want to share this, I've shared it before, but I do appreciate the thoughtful deliberation that this council takes in all items. That first item, I do appreciate the debate. I had a council member one time tell me in a previous city, come up to me and say, hey, I'm sorry we didn't go with your recommendation. I'm like, you're not hurting my feelings, right? These are recommendations, but this is the community you've been elected to serve and make direction. So you're not hurting our feelings by any way by not going with recommendations. So, but it's a tough job that you have, and you're weighing all these different options. And so we'll proceed, and that's what we do as staff. So appreciate the thoughtful deliberation. And I feel like, again, the community truly is represented by this council in every area. So it's not just a rubber stamp council. As much as that'd be really easy sometimes, it's really not the way to really run government. So appreciate that. And then finally, I'm going to be out the next 2 days. I get to fulfill my civic duty, jury duty.
Oh, wow.
So I've never participated in that selection process. I'm pretty excited. Hate to say it.
For whom? Not to be
Bountiful
nosy,
City.
but for whom?
Bountiful, Bountiful Courthouse is where I'm at to go. I already asked Chief, I said, what's going on? What cases are out there? And he couldn't answer.
Wise answer.
Because you won't be answering your phone either.
There's an easy way to get out of it for him then.
Are there any questions for me?
Actually, you said there's an easy way out of it. I've done it a couple of times, and it was extremely interesting.
No,
I really have no intent in getting out of it. I worry that my job will eliminate me from doing
Yeah,
it.
that's what I'm
You
saying.
have a very high risk.
Yeah,
So,
that's my point.
So, yes, question. We had talked several times about need to return to our planning process and budgeting to put that in there. Do you have any recommendations or thoughts on how soon we could bring that forward?
talking about a general plan?
Yes.
So Corey and I are working,
part of your
Corey's
budget
going to answer.
process?
I was going to answer, but Corey wants to answer. So part of that market analysis, again, those are small steps that we're trying to just get the data that would then lead into that general plan.
Yeah, I think a couple of things would be considering. Planning Commission will be meeting this next commission talking about some of their goals. So we'll put some lists together. They wanted to look at things, just kind of where are they at from the past? What were the list of goals? What did we accomplish? What do we see that's probably needed? They're going to have that discussion on their 11th meeting. And I don't know where that'll lead to, but what we're trying to set up is eventually a joint work session with the council to go over those goals. So that's a general planning process. The general plan itself, I understand that we didn't make the round again this year with Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Did not?
We did not make
going to ask,
the cut.
given what
We know what?
Legislator Cutler, Representative Cutler said, if we have to work with WFRC to get the front runner station as part of our general plan, you think that they want to help us out? I don't know.
Two different, yeah, those are two separate
Not
conversations.
tied
We'll be
together.
working with Wasatch Front. I'll be reaching out. I don't know if Corey.
Yeah, their grant system runs a little different than Wasatch Front General because they have a
I didn't know if they
assistance
would take
fund.
that into consideration.
But at this
and
point,
give us some preferential
we've
treatment.
budgeted, again, this is going to be, stagger fiscal years as we do this. And Corey and I'd like to sit down and maybe figure out the timeline of
Yeah, I
what we'd
mean,
like to look to hold ourselves accountable for the next year.
if you just walked in, I'm seeing now, I haven't seen the prices since this whole change of economics that has happened to us, but, You know, 2 years ago, you were talking maybe $100,000 to $110,000 for general plan of the city. Consultants are starting to get to 130 to 150 now. And that also depends on what you're trying to accomplish, how big your city is. So, you know, I think we would be on a lower range, but it would still be fairly expensive. And the struggle I see for our general plan is I don't really see that we're going to go step into the 5 neighborhoods other than the West Centerville. I don't think we're going to go step into the neighborhoods and really reformat those neighborhoods. Unless you really want to, I don't really see us, because we've reformatted Southeast, we haven't done the Southwest, so that's a place we could go to. If we're really thinking of changing the Northwest and the Northeast from the single-family nature possibility, I see the West Side plan very important. I see our general elements, when we talk about just general residential and general commercial, I think those general elements are way outdated. And so I think from the perspective of the general plan, in order to try to capitalize what you're talking about, we're having these missed opportunities. And we did have a TOD joint grant with West Bountiful participating that blew up in our face at the last minute. So I'm not sure that we can reinvent that wheel again. So we can see. I think we do need to look at the West Centerville Plan neighborhood again.
What do you mean TOD?
Transit-oriented development. That's when we wanted to do the higher density housing over there and get a station stop. And it really backfired from a West Bountiful perspective.
Oh, you don't have that work session anymore, that's out.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
There's only one Centerville resident that attended at the council. The rest of it was West Bountiful residents. And the council chose at the time not to stir the pot anymore with the neighbors. And so, so we probably need to revisit that with this market analysis, and that's probably where our primary missed opportunities are starting to really happen in that pressure. And we missed the grant with the county to connect the 2 streets. We had approval from the county, but it didn't get filed in time.
Well, let me.
Fund it, because part of it was we didn't know where we were going to get the funding, because we had to produce 250.
Part of that issue, though, is that Kevin and I have discussed, is in regards to, we don't have the right of way for that connection between the 2
Right.
cities. Really, we need to be engaging the property owners to get their input and buy-in, but that's all part of this market analysis, their input on.
And get that west side.
Before we go out and try and get millions of dollars for something we don't own, I mean, is council ready to
Yeah, it was
condemn it
$6 million.
regardless of the property owner's feelings? And I think not.
Yeah, it was
right?
$6 million in that. So it doesn't say it's off the table. We just can come back to the county with the construction of that road. I think if we get the West Centerville plan done with the market analysis, then we could come back to the main elements. And this is all talking about in-house work. Then we could come back into the main elements that needed to be fixed and rewritten. And then we can go back into, do we want to resurrect South Main Street? What do we want to do? Do we want to now further address the southwest like we did with the southeast a few years back? And if we kind of do it in that route, even though we're not doing one holistic fell swoop, we'll be back in good consideration of the general plan and in-house. So that, to my mind, is about a 2-year period.
Meld in trails and parks master
That's
plan
that
as
main,
well, right?
that's that main elements
Yeah.
section that needs to be
I thought we're
updated.
doing it, we're not waiting a year to do the next one, or 2 years to do the
Yeah,
next one. It's
exactly.
gotta,
No, do it as a cohesive
right, and it's,
process.
staff can handle a lot of it, but I still think it's important to hire a third party with some of these other
Yeah, I think
recommendations,
we're better spent if we hire the professionals for the market analysis
Mm-hmm.
section. I think we're also better off that when we come back into looking at even some housing, and I'm glad that Robin told me to be quiet at the work session earlier today.
That's what I heard.
But the moderate income housing issues and, how that plays out, we might need some data and professional help to get, our minds around that. As far as writing policy, I don't feel uncomfortable writing the policy. I've been around the block long enough to know that writing the policy is not really the hard part. It's understanding what the community wants from the temperature measurements, what the data says, and then melding that together into a policy. And we can have some subcommittees and help out in those increment levels between the groups. And, to me, that could be all done in a 2-year period, in-house.
The other thing you haven't really mentioned much is South Main Street.
Yeah, I mentioned whether we want to resurrect South Main Street and southwest neighborhood
Heard
issues.
Southwest, I didn't hear Southwest.
It's a brutal discussion.
So I think if we hit those planning goals with the commission, that'll give you some, we're going to get muddy with the fingers in the ordinances with the planning commission. But then we need to have those high-level discussions on the goals of the general plan, the South Main Street, the west side, kind of ordering how we want to approach that and set that program in place to start addressing them one in succession after another.
What is your plan with things like the Trails Master Plan? I know our Trails Committee has some things on a map. Are you still planning to have some other people come in and help develop that a little further, or?
Yeah, because from my perspective, the Trails does a great job from the bike routes. They've done a great job with the trail systems in the city, but I don't think we've done as good in, and I don't want to insult the Trails Committee, but I don't think we've looked as well as in the internal city pathways.
That's
The
my
urban pathways.
question, because
and-
Wasatch Front has sort of some plans.
Yeah, and how are we marketing it? So if we were really to develop the Shorelands Park in its current configuration, which I think that was done in 2010, so we're behind the market on what that's going to happen there. But if we were really to develop it as a job center and we really understood where we were going to try to get to, now you have the whole idea of how those trails integrate throughout that development, how you have the wayfinding signing, what do we do with 1250 West, and what do we do with, particularly from my perspective, and I don't want to insult the North Business Park owners, but if you've driven back there lately, it's awful. It's just a really bad use place. Low rent industrial, abused pieces of property, derelict infrastructure.
You mean the old portion?
The old portion.
Yes.
And it's,
East of 1250.
yeah. And is that a component to make that west side more successful? And I don't want to foreshadow anything, but if we were talking about a station that may not work with the West Bountiful residents,
That's
UTA
the
likes to
option.
go further to the north in a spacing. I just sent out UTA's stuff to
Strategic plan.
their 5-year strategic plan where they're going to place in some double tracking. And if we get to electric lines to it, and we have the 125 mile an hour speed on certain, we can have the off-peak.
Correct.
And if we can do the off-peak, North Centerville Business Park is a place to consider redeveloping in an urban renewal area.
Keep in mind that strategic plan that I've met with UTA, it starts at the Wood Cross going south, double electrifying. It's not north of Woods Cross yet.
No, it's not.
But that is.
But that's
that
where
is-
they said we'll need to get to a double track level in Centerville.
Get to our fourth chin.
Yeah, but
Is there right-of-way room for double track through Centerville?
UTA in the old West Centerville joint plan said it's a possibility, and they would prefer it to the north of Parish Lane rather than to the south of Parish Lane.
We would just create an opportunity to connect the south of Parrish to the north of Parrish in some way.
Probably like an underpass path similar to Farmington.
But that's all that we want a TOD. That's all that, if we want a station stop. You know, that matters in measuring the temperature of the community and what our expectations would be for Centerville, and then try to bring about a plan that would make that happen. And I see that North Business Park is a ripe opportunity for something, not tomorrow, but 20 years from
We
now.
have to plan it
would be.
so that it can happen.
But we need to plan it.
Yeah.
So,
Corey, do you happen to know what the zoning is
Corey
in
report.
Farmington to the north? What
Sorry.
is the zoning in Farmington to the north in that 1250 West area?
They have a small industrial area, if you've been up into there, and they have a small expansion of that. And then the other part is still their rural residential. When we met with
The
Farmington.
south development is like a storage unit.
It is a storage unit, that's where my daughter goes to.
Yeah,
dance,
and
but
they have-
they're coming down south towards.
Right, and where you had the old soccer fields is expansion of their industrial
Is
area.
that Farmington 650 West, do they call that?
They call it 650, yeah. So they still have the rural residential. Farmington, when we met with them, it's probably been 5 years ago now, when we asked them their interest, because we still have the island of county property, they said, we're so focused on Station Park and what's happening over there that that's our orientation right now. They don't really have big dreams and plans for the south end of their community on that
I
side.
engaged the city manager a year ago regarding this, maybe a year and a half ago. There was some hesitation politically about connecting, again, just wanting to preserve that dirt road. But I engaged the new city manager, and there's potentially some interest in connecting now. So if we do look for funding, it would be potentially a joint application.
Do you know why they are asphalting south of where they've been?
Yes.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, they've extended some asphalt south.
I mean, this is kind of on topic, but off, because it would relate to an extension, but do we know where the county is at with the city on the big sports complex there?
I don't know the status of that. So, I mean, there's some, great opportunities on that west side. We reformat a few issues here on the east side, handle our element issues that I think are way significantly outdated. And then that enhances our transportation plan with the alternative transportation modes to be incorporated into that. And then we do our community facilities plan that also includes our trails, community pathways, wayfinding, signing, depending on what we're trying to market, what we're trying to create as you enter and exit the city, you have an identifier. Because, with the two trailheads that are on the west end, that's a place to start looking at how you wayfind, sign, and encourage development to occur, whatever's tolerable. So I think there's some good things that can happen, but it all comes down to, do we want a TOD? Do we want a station stop? Do we want to reinvigorate the North Business Park?
And if we have a TOD, there's requirements by state law of what we have to, within the half a mile of that TOD, our zoning is required to be.
That's why I was telling President Adams, you get the electrified track, we'll talk TOD.
Yep.
Brent, do we have to, this kind of gets into the discussion of communicating clearly with UDOT what we want our interchange to look like as best as we can control it?
Well, yeah, we're having constant conversations with them now.
Because they gave us the A,
Yeah.
the B option, and then the A subset 1, B subset 1, whatever it was.
Right.
Yeah.
That reminds me, that meeting I went to was all of the cities. They were talking about getting some language together that we could submit to UDOT on things that we had kind of common ground on. Have you heard anything from them?
I have not heard anything.
The other thing is the guy I was sitting with next into that meeting said that if we could agree on the interchange down there as a council, if we were to submit that, it would make a huge impact on what we got.
If you want that on the 17th, we can make that meeting on the 17th. Let's do that.
I think we need to get on that.
Got that, Jennifer?
And then just for tongue-in-cheek fun, then if we want a TOD, we can call it Bar Tile Alley,
I-15 interchange
or we can call it Hogan Park.
decision.
What was the first one?
Bar Tile Alley. You gotta have these funky names when you get into these TODs to make it that industrial housing complex.
It may be made all out of block.
I think out in the future, just a little off of North.
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, I was gonna
Second.
say, Mayor Pro Tem,
Sure.
Okay,
where are we at?
we have a
Oh,
motion.
please.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.